You get $20, Dad. My son smirked at me, his eyes gleaming with a kind of predatory triumph as he prepared to inherit his mother's $185 million fortune. I did not blink. I did not flinch. I just quietly waited for the lawyer to read the next page, knowing exactly what was coming. When he did, my son's arrogant face turned completely white. If you have ever been underestimated by your own flesh and blood, if you have ever had your quiet patience mistaken for weakness, hit the like button and let me know in the comments where you are listening from today. It helps me share this story with others who might need to hear it. The air inside the mahogany-paneled office of attorney Harrison Sterling was thick with tension and the suffocating scent of Monica's expensive perfume. We were high above downtown Chicago, sitting in plush leather chairs that probably cost more than the small wooden cabin I had called home for the last 15 years. The city skyline stretched out behind Harrison, a sprawling grid of glass and steel. But all I could focus on was the crumpled piece of paper sliding across the polished oak table. It was a $20 bill. Derek, my 42-year-old son, had literally tossed it at me. He leaned back in his tailored Italian suit, crossing his arms with a look of absolute disdain. "Keep it, old man," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Consider it gas money for your drive back to that pathetic shack in the woods. You are going to need it now that Mom's money is finally where it belongs. With us." Beside him, Monica let out a soft, mocking laugh. She adjusted the massive diamond ring on her finger, looking me up and down, as if I were a stain on the immaculate carpet. "Honestly, Richard," she chimed in, her tone dripping with fake pity, "we are surprised you even showed up today. I mean, look at you. You are wearing a flannel shirt to a will reading. Did you really think Evelyn would leave a single cent of Apex Holdings to the man who abandoned us when things got tough? You walked away with nothing 15 years ago, and you are walking away with nothing today. It is only fitting." I remained completely silent. I rested my rough, calloused hands on my knees and looked at them. My son. My own flesh and blood. The boy I had taught to ride a bicycle, the boy I had stayed up with during thunderstorms, was now looking at me like I was garbage to be disposed of. His greed had consumed him so entirely that he could not even muster a shred of decency hours after burying his mother. Evelyn Thorne, my ex-wife, had built Apex Holdings into a commercial real estate and logistics empire worth $185 million. And Derek, currently acting as chief operating officer, was convinced the entire kingdom was his by divine right. Harrison Sterling, a man I had known for nearly 3 decades, sat behind his desk, looking deeply uncomfortable. He was a meticulous lawyer, a man who believed in order and process, and Derek's theatrical display of throwing a $20 bill clearly disgusted him. Harrison adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and looked down at the thick stack of legal documents resting in front of him. Derek Harrison said, his voice stern and authoritative, "I strongly suggest you sit down, compose yourself, and let me finish reading the terms of your mother's estate. We have not reached the final provisions." Derek scoffed, rolling his eyes as he pulled Monica closer. "What is there left to read, Harrison?" My mother despised him. She spent 15 years building this company into an absolute juggernaut without him. I am the chief operating officer. I have been running the daily operations while she was sick. The money, the properties, the trust funds, they belong to me. Just wrap up the legal jargon so Monica and I can get back to the office. We have an empire to run, and he is wasting our time. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the silence stretch. I did not look at the $20 bill resting near my elbow. I looked at Derek's perfectly styled hair, his expensive watch, the arrogance radiating from every pore of his body. He genuinely believed I was a broken, defeated old man. He believed that my 15 years of silence and isolation in that cabin were proof of my cowardice. He thought I ran away from the tax scandals that threatened the company all those years ago, leaving Evelyn to face the storm alone. That was the narrative they had constructed, and it was a narrative I had allowed them to believe. I had spent over 5,000 days and nights in that small wooden cabin, waking up before dawn, chopping my own firewood, and living a life so quiet and removed from this corporate world that even I sometimes forgot the man I used to be. I let them think I was a failure because it kept them safe. But sitting here now, listening to my son snarl at the very foundation I had laid down for him, I realized that my silence had bred a monster. Harrison sighed a heavy, tired sound. He picked up the next page of the will. The rustle of the heavy parchment paper seemed incredibly loud in the quiet room. He looked directly at Derek, and I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Pity. Very well, Harrison said. Let us continue. Section 4, paragraph 2. To my son, Derek Caldwell. Derek sat up straighter, a triumphant smirk spreading across his face. He glanced at me, making sure I was watching his moment of glory. Harrison continued reading. To my son, Derek Caldwell, I leave the exact sum of $20. The room went dead silent. The kind of silence that rings in your ears. Derek's smirk froze. He blinked, leaning forward slightly, as if he had misheard. Wait, what? $20? What kind of joke is this? Did you misread the page, Harrison? Harrison did not look up. He kept his eyes glued to the document. I did not misread anything. This specific sum has been explicitly designated to activate the no contest clause of this will. Should you choose to contest these terms, you will forfeit even this $20. Monica's jaw dropped. She let go of Derek's arm, her eyes darting between the lawyer and her husband. Derek, what is he talking about? Where is the rest of it? Where is the company? Derek slammed his hands onto the desk, his face flushing crimson. Read the rest of it, he demanded, his voice cracking with sudden panic. If I get $20, who gets Apex? Who gets the real estate? Read it. Harrison turned the page, his expression unreadable. Section 5, paragraph 1. Regarding the entirety of Apex Holdings, including all commercial real estate assets, logistics, subsidiaries, corporate shares, and associated trust funds currently valued at approximately $185 million. Derek was breathing heavily now, his eyes wide and panicked. He looked like a cornered animal realizing the trap had just sprung closed around his legs. These assets, Harrison read, his voice clear and steady, are to be immediately reverted in their entirety to their original sole and rightful owner, Richard Caldwell. The color completely drained from Derek's face. He looked as if he had been physically struck by an invisible force. His skin turned a sickly pale white, and he sank back into his luxurious leather chair, staring at me in absolute unadulterated horror. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The arrogance that had defined him just moments ago evaporated into thin air, leaving behind nothing but pure shock. I slowly reached out, picked up the crumpled $20 bill he had thrown at me earlier, and smoothed it out on the polished oak table. I looked directly into his terrified eyes, letting the reality of the situation settle over him like a heavy, suffocating blanket. It seems, I said, my voice quiet and perfectly calm, that you are the one who needs gas money, son. The bespoke weave of my son's charcoal suit catches the subdued lighting of the law office. It is a custom Tom Ford creation, likely tailored in Milan, boasting a price tag that could easily cover a year of my property taxes. I observed the immaculate stitching along his lapel, contrasting it with the frayed cuffs of my own flannel shirt. My hands rest heavily on my thighs. They are thick with calluses, the knuckles permanently swollen from 15 winters of splitting oak and repairing a rusted cast-iron stove. The physical divide between us is a vast, unbridgeable canyon of wealth and hardship. Monica shifts uncomfortably beside him, the movement catching my eye. Her left hand sports a massive canary diamond ring, a recent acquisition I recognize from a Society magazine feature. I skimmed at a local pharmacy. She purchased it using the quarterly dividend payout from the logistics subsidiary I originally founded. The sheer weight of the stone pulls her slender finger down a vulgar display of the fortune she believes she has just secured. She taps her perfectly manicured nails against the leather armrest, unaware that the empire financing her luxury is slipping through her fingers. My mind drifts back to the remote parcel of land in northern Illinois that has been my entire world for a decade and a half. The cabin sits miles away from the nearest paved road, surrounded by dense pine trees that block out the sun during the long winter months. I built my life there around severe minimalism, stripping away every luxury until nothing remained but the absolute essentials for survival. I hunt, I chop wood, and I read old philosophy paperbacks by the light of a kerosene lamp. It is a solitary existence devoid of the corporate noise that defined my early adulthood. The day I left this lucrative world behind was characterized by a torrential, freezing November downpour. I walked out the front door of our sprawling suburban estate with a single canvas duffel bag slung over my shoulder. There were no moving trucks, no lawyers, drafting property division agreements, and no drawn-out farewells. I simply packed 3 changes of clothes, a few tools, and the keys to a rusted pickup truck. I left the bank accounts, the investment portfolios, and the deeds completely untouched, abandoning an empire at the peak of its profitability. Derek was 27 years old on that miserable afternoon, standing at the top of the sweeping marble staircase in the main foyer. He screamed down at me, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings, accusing me of being a coward fleeing an impending federal audit. He believed I was abandoning his mother to face a pack of government wolves while I retreated to safety. The hatred in his eyes that day was absolute and defining, cementing a resentment that would only metastasize over the next 15 years. What my son never knew was the true nature of that government inquiry. It was a targeted political assassination orchestrated by a rival development conglomerate intent on seizing our maritime shipping routes. I willingly absorbed the entire blast radius of the scandal, accepting a manufactured narrative of personal incompetence to ensure the investigators never looked closely at the corporate accounts. My sudden, penniless departure provided the exact distraction needed to keep the company name pristine and untouchable. Evelyn maintained a strategic public distance from me ever since that day, a necessary performance to protect the stock price and appease nervous shareholders. She never publicly defended my character or corrected the devastating rumors that circulated in the financial press. Yet every year, on the second Tuesday of April, a blank postcard would arrive in the mailbox of my rural post office. There was never a return address or a signature, only a postmark from downtown Chicago. It was her silent confirmation that our unspoken pact remained intact. Derek spent the intervening years systematically trying to erase my foundational legacy from the company archives. He rebranded the subsidiaries I built, tore down the bronze plaques bearing my name in the corporate lobbies, and restructured the executive boards to install his own loyalists. He wanted to convince the world, and perhaps himself, that Apex Holdings was entirely his creation. The bitterness he harbored became the engine driving his ruthless business acquisitions, blinding him to the very foundation he stood upon. The immediate physical tension in the room snaps my focus back to the present moment. Harrison shifts his weight uneasily in his high-backed chair, sliding a heavy brass paperweight across his desk to occupy his trembling hands. The lawyer is acutely aware of the explosive volatility gathering in the confined space, bracing himself for the inevitable eruption. The air conditioning hums quietly in the background, a steady mechanical drone that only magnifies the suffocating stillness gripping the room. A thick blue vein begins to throb violently at Derek's left temple. It is a specific genetic tell he inherited directly from Evelyn, a physical manifestation that always appeared whenever she was cornered in a hostile boardroom negotiation. His breathing turns shallow and rapid, the perfectly measured inhales of a confident executive, replaced by the ragged gasps of a drowning man. The reality of his situation is cascading through his nervous system, paralyzing his ability to formulate a coherent response. Monica drops her designer clutch onto the floor, the sudden sound cracking like a gunshot against the polished hardwood. The metallic clasp shatters the heavy silence in the office, but she does not even attempt to reach down and retrieve it. Her smug complacency has completely vanished. Derek aggressively loosens his silk tie, his trembling fingers slipping against the intricate knot as sheer panic overrides his polished exterior. He yanks at the collar of his expensive dress shirt, suddenly suffocating under the weight of the invisible noose pulling tight around his neck. My own heart rate remains a perfectly steady 60 beats per minute. The true battle is only just beginning. Harrison breaks the suffocating atmosphere by slicing open a separate heavy manila envelope bearing a crimson wax seal. This specific document was deliberately hidden from the preliminary corporate audits conducted yesterday. The lawyer extracts a single sheet of vellum paper, smoothing it flat with deliberate precision. He announces that this is a springing executory addendum, a legal mechanism ensuring Evelyn only held the corporate empire conditionally. The terms stipulate that her custodianship expired the exact moment her heart stopped beating. Ownership immediately reverts, bypassing standard probate delays, entirely rendering all prior directives totally null and void without further legal review. An exhaustive inventory follows, revealing the true scale of the returned fortune. Harrison lists 3 commercial skyscrapers located in downtown Manhattan. He details full ownership of a massive maritime logistics fleet currently docked across Seattle. A previously classified shadow portfolio containing rare earth metal stocks is also transferred. The grand total amounts precisely to $185 million. Every single cent belongs exclusively to me, bypassing the established holding company structure. The designated beneficiary is confirmed as Richard Caldwell, leaving absolutely zero room for any judicial misinterpretation or manipulative legal maneuvering during this private corporate transition today. Derek snaps, launching his body forward and violently sweeping his arm across the mahogany desk. A heavy crystal decanter catches his sleeve, crashing onto the floor and shattering into hundreds of glittering, jagged shards. He screams that the document is a blatant forgery designed to steal his birthright. He loudly threatens to have Harrison disbarred before the end of the business day. Saliva flies from his mouth as he demands to see the original signatures, his chest heaving with unadulterated panic and raw, unfiltered desperation, bleeding through his tailored Italian wool suit jacket, right here in the office room now. Harrison remains unbothered, calmly reaching underneath the edge of his desk to press a concealed security button. The heavy oak doors swing open instantly, admitting 2 armed private contractors wearing dark tactical suits. They silently flank Derek, their mere physical presence, forcing my son to slowly sink back down into his leather armchair. The lawyer adjusts his reading glasses and rigidly points a manicured finger at a specific bolded paragraph located near the bottom of the heavy vellum page. He prepares to read the most punitive clause ever drafted in this entire state legal history for a corporate estate handover. He explains the interim provision, an aggressive no-contest mandate crafted specifically against Derek. If my son files a single legal motion challenging this distribution, an automated protocol activates immediately. This protocol will unilaterally release a comprehensive dossier of his undocumented offshore wire transfers directly to the Federal Revenue Service. The documents contain irrefutable proof of severe corporate tax evasion spanning the last 5 consecutive financial quarters. Any attempt to fight me in civil court guarantees him a swift and brutal criminal indictment and a lengthy federal prison sentence without any real chance of parole or legal clemency whatsoever. Harrison clears his throat again, dropping the final, most humiliating detail onto the silent room. The will bequeaths Derek an inheritance of exactly $20. However, the text dictates that this sum must not be transferred electronically or drafted via a corporate check. It must be paid using physical currency, specifically a single paper bill minted in the exact year I was exiled from the family. This physical transaction represents the absolute totality of his financial future, a poetic closure designed to mock his insatiable arrogance for the rest of his thoroughly ruined, miserable, sad, pathetic corporate adult life forever. Monica begins hyperventilating as a terrifying new realization washes over her previously smug features. Her ironclad prenuptial agreement is inextricably tethered directly to her husband, inheriting this specific estate. Without the massive corporate umbrella, she is now legally liable for half of the catastrophic margin calls Derek secretly triggered last month. She rips the canary diamond ring off her finger, realizing the jewelry store will repossess it by tomorrow morning once the banking freezes take total effect. Her lifestyle of unearned luxury has just violently evaporated into thin air, leaving massive unpayable toxic debt firmly attached to her name permanently. I issue my very first legal command as the newly reinstated head of the entire holding company. I instruct Harrison to immediately terminate every single corporate credit line currently attached to my son. The lawyer taps a rapid sequence onto his encrypted tablet, sending an instant kill signal to the central accounting department downstairs. Derek is now effectively stranded, stripped of his platinum expense accounts, his company cars, and his private travel privileges within a matter of 10 short seconds. The financial guillotine has finally dropped, severing his lifeline to my hard-earned personal family wealth for good right now. Harrison reaches into his leather briefcase and withdraws a heavy metallic master ledger device. This encrypted hardware contains the root biometric access codes to the primary server banks powering the logistics empire. He slides it directly across the polished oak table toward me, deliberately bypassing my son. I place my calloused thumb firmly onto the glass scanner embedded in the sleek casing. A bright green light pulses through the room, signifying the official transfer of global administrative power. I now control every digital asset, every shipping route, and every real estate deed outright, without any sort of legal interference whatsoever. Derek watches his wife abandon him, bolting through the door without a backward glance. He is left utterly isolated in the center of the room, trapped between two armed guards, his father and a ruthless attorney. Harrison unclasps another manila folder and slides a stark white document directly into Derek's trembling line of sight. It is a formal, legally binding eviction notice for the luxurious downtown penthouse my son currently occupies. The property belongs entirely to the corporate trust, meaning he has exactly 24 hours to vacate the luxurious premises entirely before local authorities forcefully remove his belongings tomorrow. Derek stops trembling. The panic recedes, replaced by a cold, calculated fury. He reaches into the inner breast pocket of his ruined suit jacket. He withdraws a heavily notarized legal document, dropping it directly onto the eviction notice Harrison had served him. The parchment lands with a thud against the desk, shifting the power dynamic. This new document is a state-level durable power of attorney. Derek's voice loses its frantic edge, dropping into a dangerous whisper. He announces that this specific medical and financial injunction completely supersedes any posthumous executory addendum. It holds superior jurisdiction because it was officially filed while Evelyn was legally breathing. He graphically describes the exact night he obtained her signature. Evelyn was heavily sedated on continuous morphine drips in intensive care, her cognitive functions severely compromised. Derek reveals bribing the attending physician to withhold her pain medication. This cruel maneuver induced a compliant delirium lasting just long enough for him to guide her shaking hand across the signature line. Harrison scrutinizes the document, his professional composure fracturing. The lawyer confirms the embossed crimson seal belongs to Judge Marcus Thorne, Evelyn's corrupt cousin, sitting on the state appellate court. This familial judicial connection immediately validates the document's authenticity locally. It effectively creates an impenetrable legal blockade against my newly acquired master ledger. The document grants my son absolute control over the company's treasury accounts, overriding the blind trust's asset transfer protocol. It functions as a corporate freeze ray, halting the flow of all liquid capital worldwide. While I may hold the physical property deeds, Derek now controls the immediate cash flow required to run the empire. A new immediate crisis emerges from this terrifying revelation. The shipping fleet docked in Seattle requires a massive monetary fuel deposit by midnight tonight to prevent a global supply chain default. Derek holds the only cryptographic keys necessary to release those specific funds, effectively holding my reclaimed logistics empire hostage. Derek instructs the armed contractors to step down, flashing the document in their faces. The privates exchange a nervous glance, recognizing the appellate judge's undeniable signature, and reluctantly retreat to the far perimeter of the room. The physical threat against my son neutralizes instantly. He dials a highly encrypted offshore number. Putting the device on speaker mode, he issues a direct command to his Cayman Islands banking liaison. He orders a total lockdown on all corporate treasury accounts, rendering my master ledger useless for liquid capital extraction. The stakes escalate dramatically. Derek reveals he has mobilized a shadow legal team operating out of Delaware. They are currently filing an emergency federal injunction to contest the no contest clause. Their primary argument cites my 15-year absence as grounds for familial abandonment and gross fiduciary negligence. He sneers, pulling a silver money clip from his pocket. He extracts a crisp $100 bill and places it deliberately over the crumpled 20 I had left on the desk. He declares he will use the frozen corporate treasury to bury me under frivolous litigation until I must sell my internal organs to afford a public defender. A sharp ringing cuts through the suffocating tension. Harrison's secure landline flashes red, indicating an incoming priority call from the central bank. The automated voice of the bank representative informs Harrison that Derek's command has successfully initiated a sweeping transfer of the primary operational funds into an impenetrable offshore escrow account. The empire is paralyzed. Derek leans aggressively over the desk, invading my personal space. The pungent scent of stale sweat mixed with expensive cologne radiates from him. He details his next ruthless maneuver, planning to leak the ongoing probate dispute directly to the Wall Street Journal in exactly 1 hour. This calculated media strike will crash the stock price of our publicly traded subsidiaries, burning the empire's valuation to the ground before I can legally claim it. I notice a crucial detail on the document lying between us. The notary stamp is dated exactly 48 hours after Evelyn's attending physician officially declared her entirely non-communicative. This chronological discrepancy is a fatal legal flaw, but exposing it requires a forensic medical audit that will take months to process through the backlogged judicial system. Time is the one single asset Derek currently possesses in absolute abundance. Harrison frantically types an emergency cease and desist order into his terminal, desperately trying to block the impending Wall Street Journal leak. Derek simply laughs, revealing he already pre-scheduled the publication via an automated encrypted offshore server. The devastating financial article is irrevocably set to go live, regardless of any local judicial interventions Harrison attempts to file. My son outlines the brutal reality of the next 24 hours. Without access to the frozen and liquid treasury, I cannot pay the massive property taxes on the downtown Manhattan skyscrapers due tomorrow morning. The city will immediately issue delinquency liens against my newly acquired real estate, initiating a cascade of catastrophic commercial defaults across the entire portfolio. Derek points a triumphant finger directly at my chest. He vows to drag this battle through every appellate court in the nation. He promises to bleed the estate entirely dry with exorbitant legal fees, using Evelyn's own stolen money to fund his endless war of attrition against me. I realize I must pivot my entire strategy immediately. The corporate battleground is deeply compromised, meaning I must take the fight directly into the criminal underworld he has foolishly entangled himself with. I begin mentally mapping out the violent shadow syndicate. He desperately owes $30 million to calculating precisely how to weaponize his own ruthless creditors against him. Derek buttons his ruined suit jacket, his chest puffed out with arrogant, unchecked defiance. He leans close, his voice dripping with pure, concentrated malice. He vows to ruthlessly strip me of absolutely everything I currently have, promising that by the time the sun rises tomorrow, I will be left shivering alone in the freezing street, with absolutely nothing but the worn clothes on my back. My son turns and marches out of the mahogany office, leaving the heavy doors swinging. Harrison slumps back, rubbing his temples as his monitor flashes a red warning. The lawyer reveals the catastrophic scope of the document Derek deployed. The secondary clause contains an automated asset freeze algorithm that bypasses corporate channels, entirely infecting all affiliated retail banking networks connected to the estate. My phone buzzes violently with an emergency alert from the county courthouse. Monica has filed an aggressive injunction accusing me of undue influence, claiming I utilized a hypnotic narcotic on my dying ex-wife during a fictitious midnight visit. The sheer absurdity of the malicious legal claim is immediately overshadowed by the terrifying speed of its ruthless execution. The injunction carries a swift preliminary ruling by the corrupt appellate judge officially stripping me of my executor status, pending a full psychological evaluation. I am legally barred from stepping foot within 500 feet of any holding company property enforced by immediate arrest. I walk out of the law firm and step into the biting Chicago wind, pulling the collar of my flannel shirt tight against the chill. The emotional weight of my son's ultimate betrayal settles heavily into my chest. A cold realization that blood means absolutely nothing in this corporate war. I head toward a small corner bodega, needing to gather my spiraling thoughts over a simple cup of black coffee. The bell above the glass door chimes softly, briefly masking the distant wail of a city ambulance navigating the crowded streets. I reach into my worn leather wallet and pull out a debit card tied exclusively to my modest local credit union. The card reader emits a harsh rejection beep that echoes through the quiet convenience store. The teenage cashier swipes the plastic a second time, frowning before shaking her head. The digital screen flashes a devastating error code, stating the account is entirely seized due to a sweeping probate mandate. Derek engineered his legal dragnet so ruthlessly that it illegally ensnared my personal, completely unrelated retirement funds. I unbuckle my cheap stainless steel watch and slide it across the scratched laminate counter to pay for the $1.50 beverage. I walk out the door before the bewildered barista can protest, gripping the warm paper cup tightly in my freezing hands. The absolute depth of my son's scorched earth strategy becomes terrifyingly clear in this isolating moment. He intends to starve my defense fund to death before I can even hire a litigator to fight back. Finding a secluded ice-covered bench near Millennium Park, I dial the fraud department of my rural credit union. An automated robotic voice coldly informs me that my Social Security number has been officially flagged by a federal financial task force. The system abruptly disconnects the call, locking me out of the customer service queue entirely without any human interaction. A sleek, jet-black sport utility vehicle idles suspiciously across the busy street from the public park. A muscular man in a tailored trench coat steps onto the curb, snapping rapid-fire photographs of me shivering on the bench with a massive telephoto lens. Monica has deployed private surveillance contractors to document my forced destitution gathering, visual ammunition for the upcoming competency hearing. They want to paint me as a homeless vagrant completely incapable of managing a vast commercial real estate empire. My phone vibrates again, delivering a frantic text message from a sympathetic junior clerk working in the downtown corporate records department. Derek has ordered private security teams to change every physical lock and digital access code across the entire logistics network. The clerk explains that heavily armed guards are posting massive legal notices on all building entrances, threatening severe civil penalties for trespassing. A process server suddenly steps out from behind a frozen statue, shoving a thick manila folder directly into my chest. I crack the plastic seal open to find a physical court summons, commanding my appearance before the probate review board at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Failure to attend will result in an automatic irrevocable default judgment in favor of my son. I realize I cannot possibly fight a conventional expensive legal war without immediate access to liquid capital. The psychological warfare is meticulously designed to break my spirit, to force a rapid, unconditional surrender. Derek expects me to crawl back to the negotiation table and sign away my inherent rights just to secure my basic survival. He fundamentally misunderstands the absolute source of my enduring resilience, confusing my chosen solitary isolation with inherent personal weakness. 15 years of surviving the brutal northern winters without modern conveniences has hardened my mind far beyond his pampered corporate comprehension. I sip the bitter black coffee, letting the caffeine sharpen my focus as the freezing rain begins to fall steadily around me. The battle lines are now completely drawn, restricting the conflict exclusively to the treacherous bureaucratic trenches of the municipal legal system. I carefully fold the devastating court summons, tucking it securely into the inner breast pocket of my damp flannel shirt. I walk deliberately away from the park, heading toward the majestic public library looming at the end of the long avenue. The massive stone pillars of the grand building represent a sanctuary where I can access unfiltered public legal databases without requiring expensive subscriptions. The biting cold seeps through the thin soles of my worn leather boots, serving as a constant, painful reminder of my immediate physical vulnerability. I brush past a group of hurried business executives, their expensive wool overcoats a stark contrast to my increasingly damp and ragged attire. Every step forward requires immense calculated effort, but my determination solidifies with each passing minute spent navigating this hostile urban environment. Derek believes he has completely neutralized my ability to navigate the complex corporate litigation landscape by severing my financial lifelines. He will soon discover that a man who has lost absolutely everything possesses a terrifying advantage. He has absolutely nothing left to lose. The harsh glow of a cheap smartphone screen illuminates the otherwise dark interior of my damp motel room. I am staring at the front page of the Chicago Tribune's digital Metro section. A sensationalized headline screams across the display, painting me as a predatory absentee father who emerged from the wilderness solely to harass his terminally ill ex-wife during her final agonizing days. Monica has weaponized the local media apparatus with terrifying efficiency. The article quotes anonymous, deeply concerned family friends, describing a fabricated midnight confrontation at the hospital. These fictional sources claim I aggressively badgered Evelyn for money while she lay defenseless in the intensive care unit. The digital smear campaign is a masterclass in character assassination designed to destroy any remaining public goodwill before I can even mount a legal defense. The narrative shifts aggressively in the second paragraph, detailing a supposed history of chronic financial instability and erratic behavior. Monica has provided the journalists with heavily redacted snippets of the 15-year-old divorce proceedings, carefully selecting quotes that make my voluntary departure look like a cowardly retreat from mounting debts. The article casually mentions the current probate dispute, subtly framing Derek as the heroic son valiantly fighting to protect his mother's legacy from a deranged, estranged scavenger. I power down the phone and place it on the cracked laminate nightstand, the silence of the motel room rushing back in to fill the void. The psychological toll of the public humiliation is immediate and profound, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. Derek and Monica are systematically dismantling my reputation, ensuring that if I manage to reach a courtroom, the judge will already view me through the lens of this meticulously crafted media circus. A sudden sharp rapping at the motel room door shatters the stillness. The sound is aggressive, demanding immediate compliance. I glance at the cheap digital clock resting on the scarred dresser. It reads 2:15 in the morning. A heavy fist pounds against the thin wood again, accompanied by a loud, authoritative voice commanding me to open the door immediately. I shuffle toward the entrance, moving with a deliberate, agonizing slowness that belies my racing pulse. I peer through the scratched peephole to see the unmistakable red and blue flashing lights of two Cook County Sheriff's cruisers illuminating the wet asphalt of the motel parking lot. 4 uniformed deputies stand outside my door, their hands resting cautiously near their utility belts. I unlock the deadbolt and slowly pull the door open, adopting the posture of a deeply confused, incredibly frail old man. I blink rapidly against the harsh glare of their tactical flashlights, raising a trembling hand to shield my eyes. The lead deputy, a burly man with a thick mustache, immediately demands to see my identification, his tone clipped and entirely devoid of any typical midnight courtesy. I pat the pockets of my damp flannel shirt, with feigned bewilderment, stammering apologies about misplacing my wallet during the chaotic rush from the hospital earlier that evening. The deputies exchange knowing glances, their posture relaxing slightly as they register the pathetic image I am projecting. The lead officer explains they received an urgent anonymous call requesting a wellness check, citing severe concerns about my immediate cognitive stability and potential for self-harm. The sheer audacity of the intimidation tactic is breathtaking. Monica did not just leak a story to the press. She actively weaponized local law enforcement to harass me in the middle of the night. I offer a weak, tremulous smile, assuring the officers that I am simply a grieving father overwhelmed by the sudden loss of my ex-wife and the confusing legal proceedings surrounding her estate. One of the younger deputies shines his flashlight past me, conducting a rapid visual sweep of the miserable, cramped motel room. He notes the sparse belongings, the single cup of instant coffee resting on the nightstand, and the absolute lack of any sophisticated electronic equipment or legal documents. The barren environment perfectly corroborates the narrative of a destitute, struggling senior citizen totally incapable of orchestrating a complex corporate takeover. The lead deputy hands me a generic resource pamphlet detailing county mental health services, his voice softening slightly as he advises me to contact a social worker in the morning. I accept the pamphlet with a deeply appreciative nod, my hands shaking just enough to sell the performance completely. They advise me to stay inside for the remainder of the night and lock the door securely, turning back toward their idling cruisers. I watch them pull out of the parking lot, the flashing lights receding into the freezing Chicago rain. The moment their taillights vanish around the corner, my posture straightens, the simulated frailty instantly evaporating. I toss the useless pamphlet into the overflowing trash can near the door, my mind already calculating the next necessary maneuver in this escalating shadow war. Monica's attempt to rattle me has fundamentally backfired, providing me with crucial intelligence regarding their current operational playbook. They believe I am completely isolated, entirely reactive, and totally incapable of mounting an offensive strategy outside of the conventional courtroom setting. They assume the combined pressure of the media smear and the police harassment will force me into a rapid, unconditional surrender by dawn. I pull a prepaid, untraceable burner phone from the hidden lining of my heavy winter coat, a device I purchased with the last of my available cash earlier that afternoon. I power the device on the bright green screen, illuminating my determined features in the darkness of the motel room. The time for defensive posturing has officially ended. It is now time to actively hunt my son and uncover the terrifying secrets he is so desperately trying to protect. I punch a memorized unlisted 12-digit international phone number into the burner device. The line clicks twice before a heavily distorted voice answers with a simple, sharp intake of breath. I identify myself using a coded phrase we established over 2 decades ago during a hostile corporate espionage defense. Gregory Hughes, former lead investigator for the Federal Securities Commission, immediately understands the severe gravity of the sudden midnight contact. He instructs me to meet him at an all-night diner located on the desolate industrial edge of the shipping district. The connection terminates abruptly, leaving no digital footprint behind. Evading Monica's hired surveillance team requires exiting through the rusted utility window in the motel bathroom. I drop silently onto the wet gravel of the rear alleyway, keeping my profile low against the shadow of an overflowing dumpster. The private investigators are entirely focused on the front door, relying lazily on visual confirmation from their idling vehicle. I navigate through 3 adjacent junkyards, deliberately stepping on solid concrete debris to avoid leaving muddy footprints. Reaching a completely deserted intersection, I flag down a passing commercial delivery truck, paying the driver $50 to drop me near the designated meeting location. The diner is a crumbling metallic structure, radiating the smell of burnt coffee and industrial bleach. Gregory sits alone in the furthest corner booth, facing the entrance with his back firmly against the bulletproof plexiglass window. He wears a faded trench coat that conceals his tactical shoulder holster, his eyes darting analytically across every customer present. I slide into the cracked vinyl seat opposite him, sliding a thick, unmarked manila envelope across the sticky tabletop surface. It contains $20,000 in untraceable small denomination bills, a secret emergency reserve I had buried beneath the floorboards of my ruined cabin. Gregory pockets the cash seamlessly, immediately launching into a rapid intelligence briefing without exchanging any pleasantries. He reveals that my son recently chartered 4 undocumented private flights to a notorious offshore banking haven within the last 72 hours. These flights bypassed standard customs protocols utilizing an obscure municipal airstrip registered to a defunct agricultural corporation. The flight manifests list: Monica as the primary passenger on 2 of these clandestine journeys, suggesting she is actively moving physical assets across international borders. My son is clearly hemorrhaging capital at a terrifyingly rapid pace, liquidating high-yield portfolios to cover something massive. I instruct Gregory to specifically target the secondary operational ledgers of the maritime logistics fleet operating out of Seattle. I recall Derek favoring a highly specific accounting loophole involving maritime fuel subsidies during his early executive training. Gregory nods, producing a heavily encrypted metallic flash drive from his coat pocket and sliding it underneath my coffee cup. I explains that this drive contains raw, intercepted telecommunications data extracted from a compromised cell tower near Derek's downtown penthouse. The audio files capture my son engaging in highly volatile screaming matches with unidentified foreign creditors who are actively threatening his physical safety. A startling new variable emerges as Gregory details the precise nature of these intercepted offshore communications. The creditors are not traditional banking institutions, but rather a violent shadow finance syndicate operating outside the boundaries of international law. Derek has somehow managed to leverage the primary corporate shipping routes as collateral for a massive unregulated cryptocurrency margin loan. This specific digital asset portfolio crashed catastrophically yesterday afternoon, triggering an immediate and unnegotiable margin call. My son owes these ruthless individuals $30 million in liquid cash, and the final payment deadline expires in exactly 48 hours from this very moment. This terrifying revelation completely shifts the paradigm of the ongoing probate war from a standard financial dispute to a matter of imminent survival. Derek is not fighting me out of mere corporate greed or lingering childhood resentment anymore. He needs the massive estate funds instantly because the syndicate has promised to kill him if he defaults on the remaining balance. Monica's frantic desperation to publicly declare me incompetent is suddenly illuminated as a panicked attempt to hijack the holding company treasury. They are desperately trying to steal my reclaimed fortune to pay off a lethal debt they recklessly accumulated secretly. Gregory slides a secondary folder across the table containing high-resolution satellite imagery of the busy Seattle shipping port. He points to 3 specific cargo vessels that have remained inexplicably anchored at the docks for 5 consecutive days. These massive ships are intentionally holding millions of tons of perishable commercial inventory hostage, bleeding the company's daily operational revenue completely dry. Derek is artificially manipulating the supply chain to create a fabricated corporate emergency planning to demand a massive liquidity injection from the executive board tomorrow morning. He intends to funnel this emergency cash directly to the violent syndicate tracking him. I write down a complex alphanumeric sequence on a paper napkin, sliding it discreetly toward the veteran private investigator. These are the master administrative credentials for a dormant, deeply buried offshore shell corporation I established exactly 20 years ago. I order Gregory to utilize this hidden corporate entity to aggressively buy up the syndicate's outstanding debt portfolios, effectively making me their primary operational creditor. By seizing control of the illicit financial paper, I can legally intercept the syndicate's aggressive collection efforts and redirect their violent pressure entirely onto my son. Gregory memorizes the code, instantly swallowing the torn napkin whole. A tall man wearing a bulky leather jacket suddenly enters the diner, his eyes sweeping the booths with suspicious, aggressive intensity. Gregory taps his coffee spoon twice against his ceramic mug, signaling an immediate, silent, tactical abort. I drop a $5 bill onto the table and stand up, walking deliberately toward the rear restroom hallway without looking back. Gregory slips out the front entrance, melting seamlessly into the freezing Chicago rain. I lock myself inside the cramped bathroom stall, gripping the encrypted flash drive tightly, fully prepared to obliterate my son's desperate corporate mutiny from the inside out today. I insert the encrypted flash drive into a handheld biometric decryptor while standing in the cramped, flickering diner bathroom. The decrypted data stream scrolling across the tiny screen reveals a lethal escalation in Derek's fraudulent crypto scheme. My son did not merely embezzle $30 million from the corporate treasury. He actively collateralized the entire syndicate margin loan using my forged signature. He successfully tethered the illicit digital wallets directly to my personal social security number and the primary equity of Apex Holdings. The shadow financiers officially consider me the ultimate guarantor of the violently defaulted cryptocurrency investment. A secondary folder on the drive contains intercepted communications from the syndicate, operational lieutenants. These chilling text logs detail an active, heavily funded kill order targeting me specifically. The brutal criminals have realized that assassinating the registered guarantor will automatically trigger a massive corporate life insurance payout embedded maliciously within the forged loan documents. The intimidating, heavily scarred man in the bulky leather jacket, currently pacing aggressively outside the rusted bathroom door, is not a private investigator hired by Monica. He is a specialized cartel cleaner dispatched tonight to execute me and claim the insurance liquidation bounty for his bosses. I hoist myself up toward the rusted ventilation grate, bolted to the bathroom ceiling, ignoring the sharp pain shooting through my aged shoulders. Kicking the loose grate aside, I pull my body into the narrow aluminum shaft and crawl silently through the accumulated industrial dust. I drop out the opposite end into a freezing, muddy utility trench running behind the overflowing dumpsters. A rusted motorized delivery bicycle leans abandoned against a chain-link fence. I snap the cheap padlock with a discarded iron rebar and pedal furiously into the labyrinth of the darkened shipping district, entirely evading the hitman inside. My immediate survival dictates a perilous return to my remote northern Illinois property tonight. I desperately require the physical, unregistered bearer bonds entombed beneath my cabin floorboards to legally execute the counter-buyout of the toxic syndicate debt. Navigating the bicycle toward the edge of the sprawling municipal rail yard, I spot a heavy-duty maintenance truck left idling by a distracted transit crew. I ditch the bike in a snowdrift, slide into the heated cab of the stolen utility vehicle, and drive aggressively onto the northbound interstate, blending seamlessly into the convoy of anonymous midnight commercial traffic heading far away. The treacherous journey takes 3 brutal hours as a sudden blinding ice storm envelops the desolate rural highway. To avoid triggering any hidden motion-activated trail cameras Monica might have installed around the perimeter, I abandon the stolen truck 2 miles south of my property line. I hike carefully through the dense, frozen timberline, relying entirely on military-grade thermal night vision goggles I retained from an old corporate security contract. The biting winter wind continuously lashes my face rapidly, freezing the moisture on my cheeks as I approach the familiar silhouette of my solitary wooden sanctuary. Slipping through the unlocked rear kitchen door, I navigate the pitch-black interior, relying entirely on muscle memory, cultivated over a decade of solitary isolation. I retrieve a heavy steel crowbar from the pantry and quickly pry up the 3 loose oak floorboards intentionally positioned directly beneath the massive cast-iron stove. Hidden deep within this excavated dirt foundation rests a pressurized titanium lockbox containing $10 million in untraceable bearer bonds and a fully charged encrypted satellite phone. I carefully secure the extremely heavy metal container inside my rugged canvas duffel bag, my freezing fingers struggling clumsily with the thick nylon straps. Physical exhaustion finally betrays my desperate momentum, forcing me to sit heavily on the edge of my narrow cot. Almost instantly, a potent, acrid chemical stench violently jolts my exhausted senses back to full alertness. It is the unmistakable, highly combustible odor of industrial-grade thermite, mixed heavily with raw gasoline seeping rapidly beneath the front door frame. The ambient temperature inside the small room spikes astronomically in a matter of seconds. A blinding, deafening wall of unnatural orange heat abruptly detonates across the entire length of the front porch, instantly vaporizing the reinforced timber entrance door without any warning. The structural integrity immediately compromises as the explosive thermal shockwave splinters the heavy load, bearing support beams holding the ceiling. The pressurized heat shatters every glass pane simultaneously, propelling a lethal spray of molten jagged shrapnel across the burning floorboards. The fire moves with an engineered predatory speed, consuming the dry wooden walls and devouring the oxygen trapped inside the enclosed space. I grab the heavy duffel bag containing the titanium lockbox and dive frantically toward the center of the room. A braided wool rug conceals a reinforced subterranean storm cellar trapdoor I installed specifically for catastrophic sudden emergencies. I rip the iron handle upward and plunge my body into the dark, freezing dirt shaft just as the primary roof structure collapses directly overhead. A terrifying roar of localized incineration consumes the exact spot where I stood mere milliseconds prior. I seal the thick steel hatch shut above me, blocking out the roaring inferno, and begin crawling desperately through the narrow, unlit mud tunnel. My lungs burn for oxygen as I drag the heavy bag through 50 yards of claustrophobic darkness. I finally smash through the frozen exit hatch, bursting upward into a dense, snow-covered thicket of tall spruce trees. Gasping for freezing, clean air, I collapse into the deep snowdrift, safely distanced from the blazing epicenter. I watch silently as my solitary home of 15 years burns into a towering, magnificent pillar of swirling ash and violently crackling embers. The sheer destruction confirms the absolute ruthlessness of the enemies my son has unleashed upon me. Suddenly, the newly acquired burner phone vibrates sharply inside my damp, mud-caked coat pocket. The cracked screen illuminates the dark forest, displaying a single chilling text message from a completely blocked number that is unmistakably Monica. "Stop fighting, old man. Fire is blind." The flickering neon sign outside the motel window casts an intermittent, sickly red glow across the stained floral bedspread. I am sitting on the edge of the sagging mattress, the heavy titanium lockbox resting between my feet. The air inside the $40 a night room is thick with the inescapable stench of stale cigarette smoke and cheap industrial cleaner. A single naked light bulb buzzes erratically overhead, casting long, distorted shadows against the peeling yellow wallpaper. I carefully extract a stack of $50,000 bearer bonds from the metal container, my calloused fingers brushing against the crisp, heavy paper. My burner phone vibrates violently on the scratched laminate nightstand, shattering the oppressive silence of the cheap motel. The incoming text message is from Mr. Henderson, confirming the worst-case scenario regarding my son's desperate corporate maneuvers. Derek has successfully convened an emergency unscheduled board of directors meeting set to commence in exactly 2 hours at the downtown headquarters. The official agenda lists a single catastrophic action item: the immediate, aggressive liquidation of our entire Pacific Northwest Maritime Logistics subsidiary. This division represents 30% of the holding company's total annual operational revenue. Henderson's encrypted message includes a leaked preliminary term sheet detailing the proposed fire sale transaction. Derek is deliberately undervaluing the massive logistics fleet by nearly 40% to guarantee a rapid, unquestioned cash acquisition by a rival shipping conglomerate. He has cleverly framed this disastrous corporate liquidation as a necessary defensive strategy to protect shareholder value during the ongoing, highly publicized probate dispute. The board members, terrified by the sudden media scandal Monica orchestrated, are currently heavily inclined to approve the catastrophic sale to stabilize the plummeting stock price. I realize the terrifying implication of this specific corporate maneuver instantly. The total projected cash yield from the heavily discounted subsidiary sale is exactly $30 million. Derek is liquidating a foundational pillar of my life's work solely to generate the exact amount of liquid capital required to pay off his lethal cryptocurrency debt. The violent shadow syndicate has clearly issued an absolute non-negotiable deadline, forcing my son to cannibalize the empire from the inside out just to survive the weekend. He is literally burning down the company to save his own life. I grab the satellite phone from the lockbox and punch in the unlisted 12-digit number for Gregory Hughes. The veteran investigator answers on the first ring, the background noise indicating he is currently mobile in a moving vehicle. I urgently instruct him to immediately deploy the dormant offshore shell corporation we activated earlier tonight. He must aggressively finalize the hostile buyout of Derek's $30 million toxic debt portfolio from the Shadow Syndicate before the corporate board meeting concludes. I need absolute legal control over my son's illicit financial obligations before he manages to secure the liquidation funds. Gregory confirms the debt acquisition is already in progress, utilizing a complex network of international wire transfers to mask our ultimate involvement. However, he warns that the syndicate's operational lieutenants are extremely volatile and deeply suspicious of the sudden anonymous buyout offer. They are demanding a $5 million non-refundable security deposit within the next 60 minutes to halt their active kill order against Derek. I authorize the immediate release of the necessary bearer bonds, sacrificing a portion of my emergency reserve to keep my son alive long enough to face justice on my specific terms. A harsh rhythmic pounding at the motel room door violently interrupts the secure satellite transmission. I instantly drop the phone into the open lockbox and slide the heavy container underneath the sagging bed frame. Moving with practiced silent efficiency, I retrieve a heavy steel tire iron I had placed strategically near the entrance. I press my back against the damp, peeling wallpaper beside the doorframe, gripping the cold metal weapon tightly with both hands. The aggressive knocking ceases abruptly, replaced by the distinct, terrifying sound of a metal lockpick scraping against the cheap brass deadbolt mechanism. I hold my breath, every muscle in my aged body coiled tight with adrenaline, ready to strike the moment the door breaches. The lock clicks open with a sickening snap, the handle slowly turning downward as the intruder prepares to enter. Suddenly, the loud wail of a police siren echoes from the adjacent highway. The flashing red and blue lights briefly illuminating the motel parking lot. The intruder instantly abandons the breach, their heavy footsteps sprinting frantically down the exterior concrete walkway, rapidly fading into the freezing Chicago night. The syndicate is clearly closing in, completely unaware of the ongoing debt buyout negotiations. Retrieving my burner phone, I find a new, unexpected text message from Monica. The tone is completely different from her previous arrogant threats, radiating pure, unadulterated panic. She frantically begs for an immediate, completely private meeting at a secluded coffee shop located exactly halfway between the motel and the corporate headquarters. The message claims she possesses critical, irrefutable evidence regarding Derek's illicit financial activities, offering to trade this damning information for total legal immunity and a substantial cash payout. She is desperately trying to abandon the sinking ship before the inevitable corporate and criminal collision occurs today. This sudden betrayal by my daughter-in-law presents a highly volatile, completely unexpected tactical opportunity. If Monica is truly willing to testify against Derek and provide actionable evidence regarding the $30 million embezzlement, I can bypass the lengthy forensic audit entirely. Her in public exposes me directly to the syndicate cleaners currently hunting both me and my son. I calculate the terrifying risks, knowing that securing her confession is the absolute fastest way to permanently halt the disastrous board meeting liquidation vote currently underway downtown right now. I text Monica a simple confirmation, demanding she bring all physical documentation to the specified location within the next 30 minutes. I pull my heavy winter coat on, concealing the steel tire iron within the deep inner lining. I exit the miserable motel room, stepping out into the freezing rain-slicked parking lot. The neon sign above flickers violently, mirroring the chaotic, incredibly dangerous corporate war I am about to escalate. I must secure Monica's betrayal before Derek manages to sell the logistics fleet, essentially racing my own son to the ultimate destruction of the empire. The freezing rain, slicing across the deserted industrial avenue, completely masks the heavy sound of my leather boots striking the cracked pavement. I approach the Midnight Bean, a rundown coffee shop, nestled tightly between two abandoned textile warehouses on the city outskirts. The flickering neon sign hanging above the main entrance sputters erratically, casting a sickly red glow over the thick gray fog rolling off the nearby riverbank. Keeping my right hand wrapped securely around the cold steel tire iron hidden inside my heavy winter coat, I methodically scan the empty asphalt parking lot. There are absolutely no visible syndicate vehicles idling in the surrounding shadows, but the complete lack of regular midnight foot traffic sets my heightened nerves on a jagged edge. I push open the rusted glass door, the small brass bell above it echoing harshly against the dirty linoleum floors. Monica is sitting entirely alone in the furthest corner booth facing the front entrance with her back pressed tightly against the ripped faux leather upholstery. Her appearance is jarringly out of place in this miserable, decaying urban environment. She wears a pristine beige cashmere trench coat, layered over a dark designer cocktail dress, her rigid posture broadcasting an artificial kind of terror. Resting carefully on the cracked vinyl seat right beside her is a sleek, heavily reinforced aluminum briefcase. She raises a visibly trembling hand to wave me over her eyes, darting nervously toward the vacant service counter, where a lone teenage barista sweeps espresso grounds with deliberate, agonizing slowness. I slide into the booth, directly opposite her, maintaining a calculated physical distance between us across the small table. Monica immediately leans forward, her facial expression melting rapidly into a pathetic mask of exaggerated, tearful sympathy. She whispers frantically that she could not let Derek destroy our family any longer, claiming her conscience finally broke under the suffocating weight of his endless financial lies. She paints herself as a completely innocent bystander, a terrified corporate wife who only just discovered the true horrifying extent of his offshore cryptocurrency debts. Her emotional performance is utterly flawless, complete with ragged, uneven breathing and perfectly timed artificial tears spilling over her expensive dark mascara. My gaze drifts downward, catching a crucial out-of-place technological detail resting squarely on the sticky wooden tabletop. Her latest model smartphone is placed exactly halfway between our empty ceramic coffee mugs. The device is not resting casually or accidentally. It is propped up slightly against a ceramic sugar dispenser, the primary bottom microphone array angled directly toward my face. The digital screen is entirely black, but a microscopic green indicator light flashes faintly near the top protective bezel. Monica is actively and maliciously recording our private conversation. She places both hands firmly on the polished aluminum briefcase and slides it across the table until the cold metal latches touch my chest. She quietly explains that the reinforced case contains exactly $1 million in unmarked, non-sequential $100 bills. Her voice drops an octave, adopting an unsettling tone of desperate conspiratorial collaboration. She frames this massive pile of illicit cash as a compassionate family severance package, a secret emergency gift withdrawn directly from her personal banking accounts to help me instantly escape the violent shadow syndicate currently hunting my son. Reaching deeply into her oversized designer handbag, she produces a crisp, single-page legal document and a heavy gold-plated fountain pen. The paperwork is a comprehensive, legally irrevocable waiver of corporate inheritance. It explicitly states that upon physically accepting the enclosed funds, I voluntarily forfeit any and all future claims to the Apex Holdings commercial estate. She slides the thick parchment paper right next to the active recording device, her manicured index finger tapping the blank signature line with mounting undisguised urgency. Her spoken dialogue abruptly shifts completely, abandoning the tearful familial sympathy for highly specific, legally binding terminology. She aggressively asks me to confirm aloud that I am explicitly demanding this specific monetary payout in exchange for permanently halting my hostile probate litigation against Derek. She deliberately uses the words demand compliance and silence in rapid, highly structured succession. She is blatantly attempting to trick me into verbally agreeing to a transactional quid pro quo that perfectly matches the exact legal definition of felony extortion in this state. The horrifying reality of her treacherous midnight invitation finally crystallizes in my sharp mind. She possesses absolutely no physical evidence of Derek's corporate embezzlement to trade for any prosecutorial immunity today. This entire clandestine rendezvous is a desperate collaborative legal ambush orchestrated simultaneously by both my son and my treacherous daughter-in-law. If I utter a single threatening or demanding phrase on that active recording, they will instantly transmit the damning audio file directly to the local district attorney. An active extortion charge would immediately invalidate my probate credibility, allowing Derek to push the massive logistics fleet liquidation through the panicked corporate board without any further judicial interference from me whatsoever. I glance cautiously toward the front glass windows, suddenly noticing the teenage barista has quietly disappeared into the back inventory storeroom. The ambient diner background music abruptly cuts out, plunging the entire establishment into a suffocating, deeply unnatural silence. The trap is undoubtedly multi-layered and highly lethal. If the extortion recording fails to legally neutralize my standing, the syndicate cleaners might already be positioned in the dark alleyway to ensure I never physically make it to the morning court hearing. I decide to happily feed the hidden microphone, exactly the kind of greedy, malicious persona she is so desperately trying to capture. I lean aggressively across the small table looming deliberately over the hidden smartphone recording device. I lower my voice into a deep, menacing growl, demanding she open the heavy briefcase immediately to visually verify the promised currency. I ask her pointed, aggressive questions about the specific denomination of the banded bills, feigning a sudden, overwhelming obsession with the physical cash sitting directly between us. Monica eagerly obliges, snapping the twin metal latches open loudly to reveal perfect rows of tightly banded federal currency. Her eyes light up with triumphant malice as she incorrectly assumes I am falling perfectly into her carefully laid legal snare. She presses the pressing issue further explicitly, asking me to clearly state on the permanent digital record that this $1 million is the absolute minimum acceptable price for my permanent, unquestioned disappearance from the city of Chicago. I reach out quickly and grab the thickest stack of banded bills, flipping the crisp paper with a dramatic, highly abrasive sound. I tell her forcefully that $1 million is a pathetic, deeply insulting fraction of what the corporate empire is truly worth. I raise my voice slightly, ensuring the hidden microphone easily catches my aggressive tone clearly. I inform her loudly that I will absolutely not sign any legal documents until I meticulously count every single dollar bill packed inside this shiny metal case. She smiles broadly, a cold, predatory grimace that completely shatters her earlier fragile facade of terror. She urges me to count the cash, quickly reminding me that the emergency board meeting is currently in active session and time is rapidly running out. The palpable tension inside the empty diner reaches an absolute boiling point as I prepare to execute a maneuver that will turn her digital snare into the very weapon that destroys her husband's final desperate gamble tonight entirely. I lean forward, across the sticky laminate table, my shoulders hunched inward to project a carefully manufactured image of total, pathetic defeat. I allow my breathing to become deliberately ragged, mimicking the physical exhaustion of an old man finally breaking under relentless pressure. My right hand, still gripping the concealed tire iron inside my coat pocket, slowly releases its hold. I bring both hands up to the polished aluminum briefcase, making sure my fingers tremble violently as they brush against the cold metal latches. Monica's eyes track my every movement with predatory intensity, her triumphant smirk barely contained beneath her faux sympathetic facade. I lower my voice to a raspy, pleading whisper, loudly stating that I just want this entire nightmare to end tonight, so I can disappear and finally be safe. I ask her to confirm, purely for my own fragile peace of mind, that this $1 million will truly guarantee my permanent safety from the violent people hunting her husband. She nods eagerly, her body language relaxing, as she assumes the psychological victory is completely secured. As she opens her mouth to offer another rehearsed platitude, the rusted bell above the coffee shop entrance chimes with a sudden jarring clang. A group of loud, intoxicated college students bursts through the door laughing uproariously and completely oblivious to the lethal corporate tension radiating from our corner booth. Monica instinctively flinches her head, whipping around toward the sudden chaotic intrusion, her pristine beige coat rustling loudly against the cracked vinyl seat. This split-second visual distraction is the absolute maximum tactical window my 15 years of solitary, hyper-vigilant wilderness survival has prepared me for. My trembling left hand shoots out with the practiced speed of a striking rattlesnake, palming her active recording smartphone directly off the table. Simultaneously, my right hand retrieves the identical pre-programmed burner device I purchased earlier today from my inner coat pocket. In a singular fluid motion completely obscured by the bulky aluminum briefcase, I swap the two devices, placing the silent, inactive clone exactly where her phone had rested beside the ceramic sugar dispenser. Monica turns back toward me, her focus returning to the table, entirely unaware that the digital snare she set has just been seamlessly disarmed and completely reversed. I slide her active recording device deep into the soundproof lining of my heavy winter coat, ensuring the microphone continues to capture every single word of our ensuing conversation with crystal clear, uncompromised audio fidelity. I clear my throat, dropping the frail, trembling persona entirely. My voice steadies, adopting a sharp, demanding edge that instantly wipes the smirk from her perfectly manicured face. I point directly at the open briefcase, stating loudly and clearly that $1 million is an insulting, pathetic payoff for absorbing the massive criminal liabilities her husband has recklessly generated. I lean aggressively over the table, crowding her physical space, demanding she explicitly outline exactly what crimes I am being paid to ignore. I state that if I am going to disappear and forfeit a $185 million empire, I need to hear her admit out loud exactly why Derek is suddenly so desperate to liquidate the massive logistics fleet tonight. Monica hesitates, her eyes darting nervously toward the cloned phone sitting silently on the table, mistakenly believing she is still controlling the narrative. She decides to indulge my sudden aggression, assuming her recording will perfectly capture my greedy extortion attempt, regardless of her own admissions. She leans in close, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous hiss. She states clearly, and without any hesitation, that Derek systematically embezzled exactly $30 million from the central corporate treasury to fund a catastrophic offshore cryptocurrency margin loan. She admits with a terrifying casual coldness that the shadow syndicate holding that specific debt explicitly ordered the assassination attempt at the diner and the subsequent arson attack on my rural cabin. I press the issue further, needing her to legally implicate herself in the violent crimes committed against me. I ask her directly if she authorized the use of industrial thermite to burn my home to the ground, trapping me inside the inferno. She rolls her eyes in exasperation, stating clearly that burning the cabin was the only logical way to permanently eliminate the primary legal obstacle preventing Derek from authorizing the immediate fleet liquidation. She continues her damning confession, revealing that the emergency board meeting currently underway downtown is a complete sham designed to panic the shareholders into a fire sale. She admits they are intentionally undervaluing the maritime assets by 40% to ensure the syndicate receives their $30 million payment before dawn, explicitly acknowledging their desperate plan to cannibalize the empire to save their own lives. I reach out and snap the aluminum briefcase shut, the loud metallic click echoing sharply above the background noise of the intoxicated students across the room. I slide the heavy container back toward her, stating firmly and loudly that I refuse her pathetic bribe and will not participate in their massive corporate fraud. Monica's face contorts into a mask of genuine, unadulterated panic. She grabs the briefcase handle, realizing her extortion trap has fundamentally failed to secure my compliance. She snatches the cloned smartphone off the table, completely failing to notice the slight difference in weight or the inactive screen. and shoves it aggressively into her designer handbag. She stands up violently, her chair scraping harshly against the dirty linoleum floor. She snarls a final desperate threat, promising that the syndicate cleaners will not miss a second time when they find me wandering the freezing streets tonight. She turns and marches out of the coffee shop, the bell chiming mockingly as she disappears into the thick gray fog rolling off the river. I remain seated in the booth, my hand resting calmly on the active recording device hidden safely inside my coat pocket. I have successfully captured her explicit, detailed confession regarding the $30 million embezzlement, the cryptocurrency margin loan, the syndicate assassination orders, and the coordinated arson attack on my property. I retrieve the recording device and quickly save the audio file, immediately backing it up to a secure encrypted cloud server utilizing an untraceable offshore proxy network. This audio file is the ultimate tactical weapon, a devastating legal kill shot that will obliterate their entire corporate mutiny from the inside out tonight. I dial Gregory Hughes on the satellite phone, confirming the successful acquisition of the critical audio evidence. The veteran investigator informs me that the hostile buyout of Derek's syndicate debt is officially finalized. I am now legally his primary operational creditor. The pieces are perfectly aligned for the final catastrophic confrontation. I stand up, adjusting my heavy winter coat against the chill. The time for hiding in shadows and cheap motels has completely ended. I walk out of the Midnight Bean, heading directly toward the downtown corporate headquarters. The emergency board meeting is about to receive an uninvited, highly destructive guest presentation they will never forget. Derek stands at the head of the massive obsidian conference table, gripping a laser pointer tightly as he highlights a deeply flawed valuation chart. The 12 board members look exhausted, their faces illuminated by the harsh glare of the oversized presentation screen. He aggressively pushes for the immediate vote to liquidate the Pacific Northwest Maritime Fleet, citing an unverified structural deficit to justify the massive discount. A senior shareholder, Eleanor Vance, raises her hand to object to the rushed timeline. She points out a glaring inconsistency in the projected quarterly revenue margins Derek just presented on the main slide. Derek immediately shuts her down, slamming his palms flat against the polished stone surface to assert physical dominance. He insists that delaying the vote by even a single hour will trigger a catastrophic stock collapse before morning. The boardroom doors remain electronically locked from the inside, a strict security measure Derek implemented to prevent any outside interference during this critical vote. Outside the room, I step out of the private elevator onto the executive floor, holding the encrypted administrative tablet I retrieved earlier. I bypass the physical barricade by accessing the building's central digital network, linking the audio file from the coffee shop directly to the primary presentation server. Inside the boardroom, Derek raises the official liquidation motion, demanding a swift show of hands from the weary executives. Before a single board member can vote, the main projector screen flickers violently and shifts from the financial graphs to a stark, blinding white display. A booming, disembodied voice echoes through the state-of-the-art surround sound speakers installed in the ceiling. It is Monica's voice, crystal clear and absolutely unmistakable to everyone present. The recorded audio fills the room, detailing the exact methodology used to embezzle the $30 million. Monica explains precisely how they funneled the corporate treasury funds through the Cayman Islands shell accounts to finance the failed cryptocurrency margin loan. The board members lower their hands, their expressions shifting from exhaustion to sheer horror as they listen to the wife of their chief operating officer outline a massive federal crime. Derek scrambles frantically toward the audiovisual control console mounted on the far wall. He punches the mute buttons repeatedly, but I have remotely locked out the local hardware interface from my tablet. The audio continues unhindered, moving on to the chilling admission regarding the shadow finance syndicate and the lethal assassination orders. Eleanor Vance covers her mouth in absolute shock as she hears about the thermite arson attack ordered against my remote cabin. Panic erupts around the obsidian table as 3 separate shareholders pull out their cell phones to immediately dial their personal attorneys. Derek abandons the useless control panel and physically rips the thick connection cables out of the main server rack, desperately trying to silence the room. The audio simply routes automatically to the backup communication speakers embedded in the conference table phones, ensuring the confession continues to play without interruption. I swipe my master thumbprint over the glass scanner located next to the boardroom entrance, forcing the heavy electronic doors to slide open. I walk into the room, my damp winter coat dripping freezing rain onto the pristine corporate carpet. The entire board turns to look at me, recognizing the founder they were just told was mentally incompetent and legally exiled from the premises. Derek whirls around, his face flushed purple with a volatile mixture of terror and unhinged fury. He points a trembling finger at me, screaming that the audio is an artificial fabrication generated by malicious software. I counter by projecting the accompanying digital metadata onto the restored main screen, proving the recording was captured less than 20 minutes ago, just blocks away from this very building. Recognizing his physical and digital control is completely broken, Derek resorts to a desperate legal defense to salvage the liquidation vote. He loudly declares that my presence in the building constitutes criminal trespassing under the current municipal statutes. He reminds the board that the divorce decree finalized 15 years ago explicitly and permanently severed my legal standing with Apex Holdings. He frantically quotes the settlement documents, insisting that the original marital separation agreement legally stripped me of all voting rights, equity claims, and boardroom access forever. He orders the 2 corporate security guards stationed in the hallway to arrest me immediately for breaching the building. The guards step forward, their hands resting on their utility belts, hesitating because they recognize my face from the founding portraits hanging in the main lobby. Eleanor Vance stands up boldly, demanding the guards stand down until the board can verify the authenticity of the terrifying financial admissions they just heard. She formally motions to suspend the liquidation vote indefinitely, pending a comprehensive federal audit of the Cayman Islands accounts mentioned in the recording. 2 other senior members instantly second her motion, completely nullifying Derek's reckless attempt to sell the lucrative shipping fleet tonight. Derek realizes he has officially lost the board's compliance and the necessary liquidation funds required to save his own life. He screams that the company will default by dawn, claiming my interference has just doomed them all to a hostile corporate takeover by ruthless competitors. He insists my outdated legal standing makes my entire presentation a moot point, shouting that a divorced, exiled old man has absolutely no authority to halt a legitimate executive action today. I reach into my inner coat pocket and pull out a sealed certified document bearing the crest of a superior jurisdiction. I place it gently on the edge of the obsidian table directly in front of Eleanor. This specific document has never been filed in the state of Illinois, ensuring Derek and his team of lawyers completely missed its existence during their aggressive probate injunctions. Eleanor reaches out with a trembling hand and breaks the wax seal securing the thick envelope. She slides out pristine legal papers, her eyes widening as she reads the bold heading printed across the top page. The document reveals the hidden corporate structure I established decades ago, bypassing the standard ownership models Derek believed he controlled. The room falls silent, the gravity of this revelation shifting the balance of power back into my hands. I inform the board that the ensuing legal battle will not take place in a local probate court over a standard inheritance dispute. The entire foundation of Derek's corporate authority is about to crumble under the weight of a far superior jurisdictional framework. He stares at the sealed envelope, his breathing turning ragged as he realizes the true war is only just beginning. The harsh fluorescent lights of the Cook County Probate Courthouse offered no warmth as I walked through the heavy oak double doors. The battlefield had officially shifted from the sleek corporate skyscraper to this austere municipal arena. Derek arrived moments later, marching down the central aisle, flanked by a formidable phalanx of elite corporate litigators. These were men who charged $1,000 an hour, wearing bespoke Navy suits and carrying imported leather briefcases, bulging with aggressive legal strategies. The air in the room grew instantly thick with the palpable, suffocating tension of impending high-stakes judicial warfare. Vincent Gallagher, the undisputed heavyweight champion of Chicago estate litigation, led my son's expensive legal brigade. He moved with a practiced predatory grace, immediately commandeering the petitioner's table and organizing his massive legal binders with intimidating efficiency. His reputation for mercilessly dismantling rival claims was legendary across the Midwestern circuits. Gallagher sneered in my direction, clearly viewing my solitary presence at the respondent's table as an insulting waste of his highly valuable billable hours. He leaned over, whispering a final confident assurance into Derek's ear while aggressively unbuttoning his tailored suit jacket to prepare for the slaughter. Judge Patricia Hawthorne presided over the chamber, a formidable adjudicator renowned for expediting complex commercial disputes with ruthless efficiency. She struck her wooden gavel sharply against the sounding block, the sharp crack echoing off the cold marble walls to formally call the emergency session to order. Her piercing gaze swept across the crowded petitioner's table before landing squarely on my empty, unsupported position. She explicitly noted the absence of any retained counsel on my behalf, warning me that the court would not grant any procedural leniency simply because I had chosen to face this formidable opposition entirely alone. Gallagher immediately seized the floor, launching into his opening salvo with the polished cadence of a seasoned theatrical performer. He marched aggressively toward the judge's elevated bench, dramatically hoisting a massive black leather-bound binder into the air. This heavy volume contained the original marital separation decree, filed and finalized over a decade and a half prior. He slammed the binder down onto the clerk's desk, the loud thud serving as a physical exclamation point to his opening argument. He declared that this specific legally binding document represented an impenetrable fortress, protecting the holding company from my current claims. The litigator directed the court's attention to a highly specific severability clause buried deep within the third section of the ancient divorce paperwork. He aggressively argued that this explicit legal language completely and permanently nullified any subsequent claims I could ever make regarding the corporate empire or the associated estate. Gallagher proclaimed that my presence in this courtroom was a frivolous, malicious trespass on valuable judicial time. He framed my current legal challenge as the desperate, pathetic grasping of an estranged scavenger attempting to steal a legitimate inheritance from a grieving, deeply devoted, and entirely innocent biological son. Sitting safely behind his wall of expensive legal mercenaries, Derek radiated a renewed, incredibly toxic arrogance. The sheer panic he exhibited during the boardroom hijacking had completely evaporated, replaced by the smug certainty that his wealth could simply buy his way out of this trap. He leaned back in his comfortable chair, crossing his legs casually, while flashing a condescending smirk directly at me. He genuinely believed that the thick stack of ancient divorce papers represented an absolute, indestructible shield against any maneuver I could possibly execute. He casually checked his luxury watch, clearly anticipating an incredibly swift victory. I sat entirely motionless at the scarred mahogany respondent's table, projecting a chilling, unshakable calm. There were no panicked paralegals whispering in my ear, no frantic scrolling through digital precedent databases, and no towering stacks of defensive legal briefs. A single frayed manila folder rested quietly on the wooden surface directly in front of me. The court-appointed mediator approached my table, offering a final, hushed opportunity to negotiate a minimal severance settlement before the proceedings advanced past the point of no return. I silently raised my right hand firmly and unequivocally, dismissing the mediator back to his seat. Sensing my refusal to capitulate, Gallagher escalated his aggressive courtroom assault. He submitted a formal motion to immediately dismiss the newly discovered will, entirely basing his entire argument on legally establishing me as a total stranger to the corporate estate. He cited 3 recent highly controversial state Supreme Court precedents to support this absolute, uncompromising disenfranchisement. His booming voice filled the chamber, painting a vivid legal picture where I possessed absolutely no more right to the immense corporate fortune than a random pedestrian walking down the freezing Chicago street outside the courthouse windows right at this very moment. Judge Hawthorne adjusted her reading glasses, her expression hardening, as she meticulously examined the cited judicial precedents presented before her. She understood the massive financial gravity of the situation, recognizing that a swift dismissal would immediately transfer absolute unquestioned control of the empire directly back to my son. She peered over the rim of her spectacles, focusing her intimidating scrutiny entirely upon my solitary position. She demanded a formal, legally sound counter-argument to the severability clause, warning me that failure to provide a legitimate defense right now would result in an immediate, irrevocable default judgment favoring the petitioner. I stood up slowly, the joints in my knees popping audibly in the suffocating silence of the tense courtroom. I formally requested permission to approach the witness stand, bypassing the standard protocol of arguing directly from the respondent's table. The heavy wooden gate groaned in protest as I pushed it open, stepping purposefully onto the elevated platform under the harsh, buzzing, fluorescent lights. I placed my right hand onto the worn leather cover of the ceremonial Bible, swearing the binding oath of absolute truth while staring directly into the suddenly nervous, shifting eyes of my arrogant, treacherous son. I took a deep, steadying breath, finally preparing to totally destroy his entire world forever right now. I adjust the heavy wooden chair inside the witness stand, feeling the polished mahogany cool against my palms. The small microphone positioned directly in front of my face picks up the steady rhythm of my breathing, broadcasting it throughout the silent chamber. Judge Hawthorne leans forward, her hands clasped together, formally asking if I understand the severe risks of proceeding without representation. I state clearly, for the official court record, that I am officially waiving my right to legal counsel, choosing to act entirely pro se in this matter. Vincent Gallagher immediately leaps from his seat at the petitioner table. His face flushes a deep crimson as he vigorously objects to my self-representation, citing highly complex procedural statutes designed to force untrained respondents into fatal legal errors. Judge Hawthorne raises her hand, instantly silencing the aggressive litigator, and explicitly overrules the objection with a sharp verbal reprimand. She grants me the floor completely uninterrupted, commanding the gallery to maintain absolute silence under the strict threat of immediate expulsion. Reaching deep into the inner lining of my damp winter coat, I extract a sealed, heavily frayed envelope constructed from thick parchment paper. The edges are crumbling from age rapidly today. It is secured by a unique, archaic wax stamp bearing the insignia of the Federal Treasury Department. I hold the envelope aloft, announcing that this specific parcel has remained completely undisturbed since the 7th day of November, 2009. A collective gasp ripples through the crowded gallery, the sudden noise highlighting the intense scrutiny focused entirely on my solitary position. I hand the delicate packet to the approaching bailiff, who carefully transports it up the wooden steps directly to the elevated judicial bench. Judge Hawthorne breaks the brittle wax seal, her brow furrowing deeply as she extracts documents. I announce that the document she is currently holding is a sworn, notarized affidavit drafted and signed by Evelyn Thorne herself, facilitated by a protected federal whistleblower program. This immediate revelation entirely destroys Gallagher and his narrative of a deeply estranged, bitterly divorced couple living in total isolation. I introduce a brand new, highly volatile element into the corporate dispute by naming the specific rival entity that originally framed Apex Holdings. The Vanguard Logistics Group orchestrated the entire tax fraud conspiracy using untraceable dark money funneled through a corrupt local political action committee operating in the shadows of this city. I point a steady finger directly into the third row of the public gallery, identifying a sitting state senator who has been quietly observing the proceedings disguised in a simple gray overcoat. The senator visibly recoils his sudden panic, confirming his direct, undeniable involvement in the massive corporate sabotage. Gallagher panics, slamming his fists onto his table and demanding the courtroom be instantly cleared of all non-essential personnel to prevent a massive political scandal. He recognizes that integrating a sitting politician into a standard probate hearing completely shatters his carefully controlled judicial environment. Judge Hawthorne ignores him entirely now. She signals the armed bailiffs to immediately lock the heavy oak double doors at the rear of the chamber. She effectively traps everyone inside the courtroom, ensuring the explosive testimony continues on the permanent, unsealed public record. I reveal the true operational nature of my highly publicized marital separation, presenting a secondary document located within the unsealed envelope. This paper is a covert immunity agreement signed by a former director of the Department of Justice, classifying the divorce as a federally sanctioned undercover operation. My abrupt, penniless departure from the family estate was an officially mandated protective measure implemented always. It was designed to insulate the corporate treasury from impending political seizure. This completely invalidates the severability clause the Gallagher relied upon, proving the separation was a tactical illusion rather than a binding domestic fracture. Derek violently shoves his chair backward, the heavy wood crashing loudly against the marble floor as he stands up in raw defiance. He screams that the federal immunity agreement is a desperate fabrication, pointing a shaking finger at my face while demanding I be arrested for perjury. Judge Hawthorne strikes her sounding block with maximum force, issuing a final, uncompromising threat to hold him completely accountable. She commands 2 bailiffs to flank Derek, forcing him to sit back down under the immediate penalty of being dragged into a holding cell. I direct the court clerk to focus attention upon a seemingly mundane detail buried deep within the 3rd section of the very divorce decree Gallagher proudly submitted. I explain that the specific alphanumeric sequence categorizing the alimony waivers is not standard legal formatting, but a highly sophisticated cryptographic cipher. I instruct the court clerk to input these specific digits into the Federal Banking Registry database currently projected on the primary courtroom monitor. The foundation collapses today. The decoded sequence materializes on the large digital screen, revealing a passive, highly classified shadow account that has been silently operating for over a decade. I explain that the alimony funds Evelyn supposedly retained were actually being automatically routed into this specific ledger to track illicit campaign contributions from the Vanguard Group. This hidden account served as an invisible financial tripwire, meticulously recording every single illegal bribe processed by the corrupt state senator sitting behind my son. The probate hearing has officially transformed into a massive live federal corruption tribunal. I lock eyes with Derek, driving the final nail deeply. The $30 million he secretly stole from the Central Treasury last month accidentally triggered this exact federal tripwire due to his sloppy cryptocurrency conversions. The international banking authorities were alerted to his illicit transfers 3 full weeks before Evelyn even signed the fraudulent medical power of attorney. The heavy oak doors at the rear of the courtroom suddenly burst open with explosive force. 6 heavily armed federal agents wearing tactical vests stream into the chamber, aggressively bypassing all local municipal jurisdiction protocols. They march directly toward the 3rd row of the gallery, flashing active arrest warrants completely unchecked now. The federal agents swarm the 3rd row of the gallery with surgical precision, snapping heavy steel cuffs onto the state senator's wrists before he can even utter a single syllable of protest. His expensive gray overcoat tears at the shoulder as they aggressively force him toward the rear exit. The flashing badges of the tactical team rendering any local municipal interference completely impossible. Vincent Gallagher, realizing his entire legal strategy has just collided with a massive federal RICO investigation, quietly begins packing his leather briefcase. The $1,000 an hour litigator silently signals his junior associates to abandon the petitioner's table, leaving my son utterly isolated in the center of the chaotic chamber. Judge Hawthorne furiously gavels the gallery into total submission, demanding absolute silence while ordering the remaining federal officers to secure the perimeter of her courtroom. I remain standing at the witness podium, allowing the explosive reality of the arrests to fully settle over the terrified executives and lawyers present. Reaching into the frayed manila folder resting on the wooden ledge, I extract a small leather-bound journal secured by a fragile brass clasp. I announce to the court that this diary represents Evelyn's private, unfiltered psychological record, maintained meticulously over the last 5,000 days of her life. I flipped to a specific page, marked by a faded silk ribbon, handing the open journal to the bailiff for immediate judicial review. The handwritten ink details the horrifying depth of the political extortion ring that nearly annihilated our family, revealing a terrifying new dimension to the corporate siege. Judge Hawthorne adjusts her spectacles, her eyes scanning the frantic, terrified handwriting of my late former wife. I explain that the Vanguard Logistics Group did not merely fabricate tax discrepancies. They maliciously planted 3 offshore shell companies entirely under Evelyn's maiden name. The corrupt Political Action Committee intended to frame her as the absolute mastermind of the international fraud, guaranteeing her a minimum of 30 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. The only viable legal maneuver to sever her liability was for me to sign a sworn sealed confession falsely claiming I had systematically forged her signatures and manipulated her personal accounts without her knowledge. I absorbed the total sum of the manufactured criminal liability, utilizing the ensuing federal immunity agreement to permanently immunize her from prosecution. Derek stares at me, his arrogant facade completely shattered by the devastating revelation that his mother was mere inches away from spending the rest of her natural life behind bars. I turn my gaze directly toward my trembling son, unleashing a secondary, even more agonizing truth regarding his own unwitting participation in the massive scandal. I inform him that during his brief tenure as a junior logistics manager 15 years ago, he casually authorized 12 separate maritime routing manifests containing highly radioactive illicit cargo. The Vanguard Group purposefully slipped those specific documents onto his desk, intending to use his naive signatures to charge him as a primary accomplice in the global smuggling ring. I lean into the microphone, ensuring my voice echoes clearly through the stunned, silent courtroom. I reveal that my false confession specifically absorbed those 12 corrupted manifests, completely erasing Derek's name from the federal indictments before the grand jury could ever see them. I chose absolute destitution, public humiliation, and perpetual exile to ensure my son's fledgling corporate career was not obliterated before it even began. His hands grip the edge of the mahogany table, his knuckles turning stark white as the crushing weight of my silent 15-year sacrifice finally crushes the breath from his lungs. The profound hatred he harbored toward me was built entirely upon a foundation of life-saving, paternal protection. I direct the court's attention back to the leather-bound diary currently resting on the elevated judicial bench. I describe the unbearable psychological torment Evelyn endured while publicly playing the role of the scorned, betrayed corporate matriarch. She was trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, forced to smile for the financial press, while watching the man she loved freeze in a dilapidated, uninsulated wooden cabin. Her guilt became a relentless driving obsession, transforming her into a ruthless corporate predator operating entirely from the shadows. She systematically dismantled the Vanguard supply chains, over a decade aggressively acquiring their undervalued assets and funneling the massive profits directly into the secure holding accounts. The $185 million currently sitting in the corporate treasury does not represent standard commercial growth or passive real estate appreciation. It is a massive recovered war chest, comprised almost entirely of wealth she violently stripped from the corrupt politicians who tried to destroy us. She spent every waking hour of her remaining years functioning as an invisible financial assassin, meticulously consolidating this staggering fortune for one singular, unalterable purpose. The dramatic, highly publicized will reading was merely her final, masterful performance, designed to legally launder the reclaimed empire back into my hands without alerting the surviving syndicate members. Derek collapses forward, burying his face in his trembling hands as the agonizing truth systematically destroys his entire reality. He realizes that his mother never actually despised me. She spent her entire life operating as my loyal, deeply embedded financial operative. The power of attorney he violently forced her to sign was entirely worthless, because she had already legally sequestered the true wealth years before her terminal diagnosis. She utilized her dying breaths to set a flawless, unescapable trap, ensuring that if her son ever succumbed to the toxic greed she feared, he would be instantly and permanently disinherited. Judge Hawthorne closes the leather journal, the sharp snap of the brass clasp resonating like a gunshot across the hushed, deeply tense room. She removes her glasses, her stern judicial demeanor softening into a look of profound, uncharacteristic respect. She officially commands the immediate permanent dismissal of the malicious probate injunction filed by my son. The bitter legal war over the surface estate has now officially irrevocably ended forever. The sudden dismissal of the probate injunction leaves a ringing vacuum in the courtroom, but my son refuses to concede. Derek abruptly pivots his strategy, waving the crinkled medical power of attorney high above his head like a desperately waving white flag. He declares to the chamber that the probate ruling is entirely irrelevant to his immediate executive authority. He claims this healthcare and financial proxy grants him unilateral permission to bypass the estate entirely and liquidate the commercial real estate portfolio directly through standard corporate bylaws. He barks an order at his remaining junior assistant, commanding him to initiate the transfer of the Pacific Northwest Maritime Fleet to the waiting buyers on the open market, hoping to secure the cash before the gavel falls. I step away from the witness podium and approach the clerk desk, producing a final, unremarkable slate gray folder from my coat pocket. I slide the heavy dossier across the polished wood toward the elevated bench, requesting Judge Hawthorne examine the original articles of incorporation filed in the state of Delaware. The judge slices the thick paper seal open, her eyes widening as she begins reading the classified, heavily guarded foundational charters. I announce to the silent gallery that Apex Holdings was never incorporated as a standard C corporation, an S corporation, or a limited liability company. It was deliberately and securely engineered under a completely different, highly restrictive financial architecture that escapes conventional municipal jurisdiction. The entire corporate empire is structured as an impenetrable, federally shielded, irrevocable blind trust. Evelyn Thorne never legally owned a single fraction of a share property deed or maritime vessel associated with the massive conglomerate. Her formal title was strictly limited to the role of an appointed trustee, a temporary fiduciary custodian, legally bound to manage the staggering wealth under extreme, highly regulated federal oversight. The financial architecture was meticulously designed to create an absolute firewall between the daily operational control of the assets and their true ultimate ownership. I turn my gaze directly toward my son, delivering the absolute crushing reality of his precarious situation. I am and have continuously remained for the entirety of the company existence, the exclusive grantor and the sole absolute beneficiary of the entire multi-million-dollar trust corpus. Every single profit generated, every skyscraper acquired, and every shipping route expanded ultimately flowed directly back into a secure vessel, completely insulated from any standard marital asset division or public probate scrutiny. The empire was always mine, hidden perfectly in plain sight through ironclad Delaware trust statutes. Vincent Gallagher, Jr. Associates, who had lingered near the petitioner table, look physically ill as they comprehend the catastrophic magnitude of their due diligence failure. The medical power of attorney Derek clutches so desperately in his sweating hands is instantly rendered, completely legally, toothless. A standard state-level proxy document absolutely cannot penetrate the federally protected walls of a sovereign blind trust under any legal circumstance. His signature holds zero authority over the sheltered assets, meaning every single liquidation order he just attempted to issue is entirely fraudulent and criminally prosecutable. The succession protocol coded deep within the original trust charter dictates an immediate transfer of authority. The exact millisecond the acting trustee ceases to draw breath, all administrative and financial powers instantly consolidate back to the living beneficiary. The biometric master ledger I activated earlier in the law office was not merely a password unlocking a bank account. It was the precise digital trigger formally executing the trust reversion clause, locking Derek out of the corporate treasury permanently and irrevocably without requiring a single court order. Judge Hawthorne utilizes a heavy brass magnifying glass to meticulously verify the intricate watermarks stamped across the Delaware certifications. She nods slowly, signaling her absolute comprehension of the flawless, impenetrable legal maneuver. She formally strikes down the validity of the medical proxy, officially ruling the document completely void regarding any and all assets held within the Apex Holdings umbrella. She strikes her wooden gavel with deafening finality, issuing a permanent, binding restraining order barring Derek from executing any further corporate actions, communications, or building access. Derek collapses back into his wooden chair, his body physically shattering under the weight of his absolute, unmitigated defeat. He stares blankly at the crumpled proxy document, resting in his trembling palms, finally realizing it is nothing more than worthless trash in this federal domain. He turns his head slowly toward his wife, his eyes pleading for a new miraculous strategy to escape the crushing syndicate debt and the impending federal indictments currently suffocating him. I expects her to scheme a brilliant exit, relying on her ruthless ambition to somehow salvage their ruined luxurious lifestyle before the authorities completely seal the perimeter. Monica performs a rapid, incredibly cold mental calculation, evaluating the smoking crater of her immediate future. She recognizes there is no hidden money, no corporate sanctuary, and no escaping the federal agents swarming the courtroom or the violent syndicate cleaners waiting in the dark city streets outside. She slowly stands up from the petitioner table, her pristine beige cashmere coat rustling against the heavy wooden furniture. She does not spare a single glance downward at her devastated husband, her facial expression freezing into a mask of pure self-preserving detachment. She aggressively snaps the gold clasp of her designer handbag, shut the metallic sound cutting violently through the hushed tension of the judicial chamber. Monica pivots sharply on her expensive designer heels, turning her back entirely on the man she manipulated into orchestrating this massive corporate mutiny. She marches briskly down the central aisle, her chin held high as she physically pushes her way past the armed federal marshals guarding the rear exit. She completely abandons Derek to face the catastrophic financial ruin, the terrifying shadow syndicate, and the impending federal prison sentences utterly and completely alone. The rusted hinges of room number 4 screech loudly in protest as I push the door open, seeking refuge from the intensifying Chicago sleet. A heavy armored black sport utility vehicle with deeply tinted windows slowly creeps into the far corner of the motel parking lot, its headlights entirely extinguished. The Shadow Finance Syndicate has clearly bypassed the downtown corporate grid, utilizing illegal cellular triangulation to track my son's desperate movements directly to this miserable location. The air temperature drops sharply, freezing the muddy puddles forming across the cracked asphalt into treacherous sheets of black ice. A ragged, stumbling figure emerges from the dense fog, rolling off the adjacent highway overpass. Derek is entirely unrecognizable from the arrogant executive who commanded the probate courtroom just hours prior. His bespoke wool suit is torn at the shoulder, soaked completely through with freezing rain and stained with dark automotive grease. A vicious, deep purple contusion swells aggressively beneath his left eye, a clear physical indicator that the cartel cleaners have already intercepted him and delivered a brutal preliminary warning. He limps heavily on his injured right leg, gasping for shallow, painful, freezing breaths now. He collapses onto this frozen concrete directly outside my threshold, his ruined Italian leather shoes slipping uselessly against the accumulating ice. The sheer physical degradation of the former chief operating officer is absolute and terrifying to witness. He crawls forward on his hands and knees, dragging his battered body through the freezing slush until his bleeding fingers graze the rusted metal frame of my open front door. The sleet continues to fall relentlessly, coating his matted hair in a thick layer of frost as he tilts his bruised face upward to meet my cold, unyielding gaze. He screams over the howling wind, revealing that the syndicate operatives just physically confiscated his passport and violently destroyed his encrypted digital ledger hardware. This catastrophic loss permanently severs his access to any hidden offshore emergency funds he had secreted away. He is entirely trapped within the municipal limits of the city, completely devoid of any viable escape route across international borders. The criminal network has effectively cordoned off all major transit hubs, utilizing corrupted local transportation officials to monitor the airport departure manifests and commercial train schedules specifically for his exact name. I step forward into the doorway, gripping the heavy steel tire iron tightly in my right hand to establish a firm, impenetrable physical boundary between us. Looking past his trembling shoulders, I spot a faint, distinct crimson laser dot momentarily sweeping across the dark, wet fabric of his ruined jacket. The sniper positioned inside the idling black vehicle across the lot is actively tracking him utilizing military-grade thermal optics to monitor this exact interaction. The assassins are intentionally allowing him this final desperate attempt to secure their stolen capital before executing their lethal mandate. Derek violently grabs the hem of my damp jeans, confessing that the ruthless creditors have issued an absolute non-negotiable ultimatum expiring in exactly 2 hours. He frantically begs me to initiate an emergency wire transfer, utilizing the blind trust routing numbers he knows I now control. He promises to permanently vanish into the criminal underground, offering to legally change his identity and never contact the family again if I simply clear his catastrophic balance. The raw, unfiltered desperation in his cracking voice echoes pathetically against the peeling yellow paint of the cheap motel exterior wall. A devastating new parameter emerges as he hysterically breaks down the current financial mathematics of his impossible situation. The original debt was $30 million, but the syndicate deliberately applied a massive predatory $5 million default penalty the exact minute he lost the boardroom liquidation vote. He now owes a staggering $35 million in cold, untraceable liquid currency, a sum that requires immediate liquidation of premium corporate assets to fulfill. The brutal interest rate on this illicit loan is compounding by the hour, actively bleeding the theoretical value of his life into negative territory. Attempting to purchase my mercy, Derek offers a critical piece of actionable corporate intelligence regarding the enemy network. He stammers out the true identity of the local syndicate enforcer, a ruthless individual operating under the guise of a senior vice president at a rival logistics conglomerate. This stunning revelation directly connects the violent cryptocurrency underworld to the very same ruthless corporate competitors who previously attempted to destroy Apex Holdings 15 years ago. My son unknowingly partnered with the exact same political and financial predators who originally forced me into my solitary, miserable wilderness exile. I quietly processed this incredibly volatile information, recognizing it as the ultimate tactical key required to completely dismantle the remaining hostile corporate factions in the city. The intelligence allows me to proactively target the rival logistics firm using the federal authorities currently mobilizing downtown, effectively turning my son's massive failure into my greatest strategic victory. However, this valuable data does not magically erase the catastrophic damage he intentionally inflicted upon me, nor does it absolve him of his malicious, highly calculated attempts to imprison me. I absolutely refuse to finance a criminal organization to save a traitor. I firmly kick his grasping, bloody fingers away from my boot, denying his pathetic request with absolute chilling finality. I loudly inform him that transferring $35 million to a cartel would instantly make me a primary accessory to international terrorism, a line I will never cross for anyone. I command him to stand up and walk directly toward the federal building downtown, stating that a maximum security prison cell is the only concrete structure capable of protecting him from the sniper aiming at his spine. I step backward into the dark, foul-smelling motel room, breaking eye contact with the weeping, ruined man who used to be my son. The heavy wooden door slams shut with a deafening crack, the rusted deadbolt sliding firmly into place as I leave him entirely alone in the freezing, merciless, pitch-black dark. The hollow thud of bruised fists slamming against the thin wooden door reverberates through the cramped motel room. Derek refuses to accept his banishment into the freezing darkness, his frantic pounding escalating into desperate scratching against the peeling exterior paint. He screams that the cartel sniper is adjusting his scope, hysterically begging for temporary sanctuary inside the miserable room. A sudden crack of splintering fiberglass echoes sharply as he attempts to forcefully kick through the fragile lower panel of the barricade. The structural frame groans under the violent assault, threatening to expose the interior to the lethal crossfire outside immediately. I unbolt the rusted deadbolt and swing the door wide open, stepping aggressively back out onto the ice-covered concrete walkway. The freezing sleet instantly bites into my exposed face, but my posture remains perfectly rigid and completely unyielding. My eyes lock onto the broken man sprawling in the muddy slush, projecting an absolute void of the paternal warmth he once took for granted. Derek pauses his frantic assault, a pathetic spark of false hope illuminating his battered face as he mistakenly assumes I have surrendered to his emotional extortion. He reaches a bloody hand upward, begging for salvation today. I reach deep into the inner pocket of my damp flannel jacket, bypassing the heavy titanium lockbox entirely. My calloused fingers wrap around a specific, deliberately preserved piece of paper currency I retained from our initial confrontation. I pull out the exact same crumpled $20 bill my son had arrogantly thrown across the mahogany desk hours ago. I hold the green paper aloft for a fraction of a second, letting the flickering red neon light illuminate its severe irony before dropping it directly into the freezing mud at his ruined knees. "This is your inheritance," I state coldly now. "Buy a coffee before the feds arrive," I command, my voice cutting through the howling wind with absolute finality. Derek stares blankly at the soggy currency slowly dissolving in the toxic urban slush. The devastating reality of his total disinheritance finally shattering his psychological defenses. The heavy black armored vehicle idling ominously at the far edge of the parking lot suddenly flashes its high beams in a rapid blinding sequence. This aggressive optical signal acts as a terrifying countdown, confirming the Shadow Syndicate has officially exhausted their patience and is preparing to execute the lethal default protocol without any hesitation. The faint crimson laser dot reappears, tracking deliberately upward from the asphalt to rest squarely against the center of my son's heaving chest. Driven by pure survival instinct, Derek lunges forward, attempting to tackle my legs and force his way past my physical blockade. I anticipate the clumsy maneuver, pivoting my weight smoothly and allowing his momentum to carry him crashing painfully onto the unyielding frozen pavement. Retrieving the encrypted burner phone from my coat, I illuminate the digital screen to reveal an active, ongoing voice connection to the Regional Federal Bureau of Investigation Emergency Operational Tip Line right now. The dispatcher's crisp, professional voice broadcasts clearly through the external speaker, actively confirming my real-time coordinates to the tactical response units already mobilized in the sector. I dictate loudly into the receiver that a high-value fugitive wanted for international wire fraud and corporate espionage is currently trespassing at my location. The syndicate assassins, monitoring the exchange through their directional parabolic microphones, still of a heavily armed government strike team. The black sport utility vehicle's massive engine roars to life, tires screeching violently against the black ice as the cartel prioritizes immediate operational evasion today. The lethal crimson targeting laser vanishes completely into the dense fog, leaving my son shivering alone without the immediate threat of a sniper bullet tearing through his spine. The distinct piercing wail of approaching federal sirens begins to echo rapidly down the adjacent industrial highway, growing louder with every passing second. Derek scrambles clumsily to his feet, his ruined Italian leather shoes slipping wildly against the treacherous frozen concrete as panic overrides his physical exhaustion. He is violently forced to choose between freezing to death, being hunted by fleeing cartel cleaners, or surrendering immediately to converging government authorities right now. He snatches the soaked $20 bill from the freezing mud, clutching the pathetic currency tightly against his chest, like a useless, degrading lifeline. My son turns his back on me for the final time, stumbling erratically toward the illuminated main road to intercept the approaching police cruisers. He officially breaks his miserable siege on my motel room, choosing the harsh security of a federal prison cell over a violent death in the criminal underworld. I watch his pathetic silhouette fade into the relentless sleet, feeling absolutely zero remorse for the brutal, uncompromising boundary I have permanently established here today. I immediately dial Gregory Hughes on the secure satellite channel, providing the veteran investigator with the explosive new intelligence regarding the rival logistics vice president. I command Gregory to utilize this specific operational data to launch a massive coordinated hostile strike against the rival conglomerate's vulnerable executive board before sunrise. Gregory confirms the immediate deployment of aggressive federal subpoenas targeting the competitor's primary corporate suite, utilizing the embedded corruption evidence to paralyze their operational infrastructure. The rival company's stock valuation instantly begins to plummet across the international pre-market trading platforms as our engineered whistleblower leaks hit global financial wires. A sleek, heavily armored silver sedan pulls smoothly into the vacant space left by the fleeing cartel operatives. Harrison Sterling and Aisha Jackson step out of the secure transport vehicle, flanked immediately by two highly trained private security contractors holding perimeter defense positions. Aisha hands me a pristine, tailored midnight blue wool overcoat, gently replacing the damp, freezing flannel shirt that defined my wilderness exile. Harrison opens the heavy rear door, presenting a glowing digital tablet, displaying the live municipal security feed of the Federal Plaza downtown. The screen shows Derek surrendering to heavily armed tactical agents right away today. The armored sedan's window hums softly as it rolls down, letting freezing rain spray against the reinforced glass. Through the opening, I watch the federal assault team swarm the muddy perimeter of the motel parking lot. Armed agents tackle my son directly into the freezing oil-stained slush. The impact splashes dark mud across the white lettering of the bureau windbreakers. Derek offers no physical resistance, his body entirely limp under the weight of three veteran officers pinning his shoulders to the concrete. A senior agent steps forward, gripping a flashlight that cuts through the thick fog. He reads the formal indictment aloud, his booming voice echoing against the dilapidated motel walls. The charges list corporate wire fraud, international money laundering, and severe violations of federal racketeering statutes. Steel handcuffs click shut around my son's wrists with undeniable finality. I signal the security contractor driving our vehicle to engage the transmission, ordering him to leave the scene immediately without sparing another glance toward the ruined man. The encrypted tablet resting on my lap chimes with an update from the Regional Transportation Authority. Gregory Hughes has successfully integrated the federal apprehension warrants directly into the municipal transit security networks. A live high-definition surveillance feed populates the glowing screen streaming directly from Terminal 5 at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The bustling concourse is packed with exhausted holiday travelers, entirely unaware of the high-stakes federal operation silently unfolding. Monica stands nervously near the boarding queue for a direct red-eye flight to Cabo San Lucas. She has abandoned her pristine beige cashmere coat, attempting to blend into the crowd, wearing a generic dark hoodie and oversized sunglasses. A sleek designer carry-on bag is clutched desperately to her chest, packed with untraceable jewelry and physical cash salvaged from the penthouse safe. She anxiously checks her boarding pass as the airline attendant announces the final boarding call for the first-class cabin. Four plainclothes federal marshals seamlessly detach themselves from the surrounding crowd of tourists. They move with terrifying coordination, flanking her position before she can process their sudden proximity. The lead marshal flashes a golden badge, physically blocking her path to the jet bridge while firmly grasping her upper arm. She recoils violently, screaming indignities at the officers while demanding to contact her private attorney. The marshal ignores her frantic protests, stating the primary charge of first-degree attempted arson, citing the deployment of industrial thermite. The realization of her total legal destruction shatters her arrogant facade instantly. Monica drops the expensive carry-on bag, the heavy luggage, crashing onto the polished terminal floor as she collapses into a pathetic sobbing heap. Two female officers haul her back to her feet, roughly securing her wrists behind her back, as dozens of horrified passengers record the humiliating spectacle on their mobile devices. The live video feed terminates abruptly, closing the final chapter on my treacherous daughter-in-law's desperate failed escape. The silver sedan glides smoothly into the subterranean parking garage of a heavily secured luxury residential high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan. Harrison has arranged a temporary, fully furnished executive suite to serve as my operational base for the remainder of the week. Hanging meticulously from a mahogany valet stand in the center of the master bedroom is a bespoke dark charcoal wool suit. A master tailor worked continuously through the night to assemble this armor. Utilizing measurements Gregory discreetly acquired from my archived medical files, I strip off the damp, freezing flannel shirt that defined my wilderness existence for a decade and a half. Stepping into a scalding hot shower, I wash away the lingering stench of the burnt cabin, the cheap motel smoke, and the freezing industrial mud. The steaming water revitalizes my exhausted muscles, preparing me for the brutal corporate restructuring that must commence at dawn. Drying off, I dress methodically, feeling the luxurious, familiar weight of the tailored wool settle perfectly across my shoulders. I select a crimson silk tie from the dresser, knotting it with a practiced muscle memory precision. But I had lost completely. Sliding my feet into polished black leather Oxfords, the transformation is absolute and undeniable. The frail, bearded hermit who wandered out of the northern woods yesterday no longer exists. Staring into the floor-to-ceiling mirror, I recognize the ruthless, calculating chairman of the board, staring back at me, ready to execute a massive, uncompromising purge of the entire holding company. The morning sun pierces through the dense cloud cover as my armored vehicle arrives at the primary entrance of the Apex Holdings skyscraper. The towering glass structure reflects the bright golden light, projecting an image of unshakable corporate stability, despite the absolute chaos currently tearing through the executive ranks. I step out of the sedan flanked by my armed private security detail and stride purposefully through the massive revolving glass doors. The cavernous marble lobby is instantly paralyzed by my sudden imposing arrival. The head of building security, a veteran employee working here, when I founded the logistics empire, drops his two-way radio in sheer astonishment. He rushes forward to intercept me, bypassing the automated security turnstiles entirely. He formally addresses me by my proper title, his voice trembling with a mixture of profound respect and genuine shock. I nod once, accepting his deference, and order him to immediately revoke every single executive access badge currently issued to any member of Derek's former administrative cabinet. I step into the private gold-plated elevator reserved exclusively for the chief executive officer. The doors slide shut, lifting me smoothly toward the top floor of the towering commercial fortress I built with my bare hands. Stepping into the sprawling, panoramic office, I walk directly past the shattered crystal decanter Derek destroyed yesterday. I approach the massive oak desk, pulling out the heavy leather executive chair. Sitting down, I place both hands firmly on the polished wood, officially and permanently reclaiming my undisputed throne. I sit behind the massive oak desk inside the primary executive office of Apex Holdings, looking out over the sprawling Chicago skyline. The $185 million empire is officially back under my direct operational control. Did reclaiming this monumental corporate fortress magically make me feel decades younger? No. Did it instantly erase the 15 harsh years of isolated survival I endured inside that freezing wooden cabin? Not a chance. But it successfully purchased something far more valuable than youth or erased trauma. It secured absolute sovereignty over every single aspect of my own remaining natural life. I spent the entire morning signing the final restructuring documents authorized by the newly appointed executive board. I systematically terminated every vice president who had enabled the previous toxic regime, replacing them with hungry ethical directors recruited from working-class backgrounds. I then officially established a $50 million endowment operating strictly under Evelyn's name, dedicated exclusively to funding advanced neurological research. She had played her dangerous part perfectly, operating as an embedded ghost within the boardroom to ensure the empire survived until I could legally return. The research facility opens next month in her honor. As for Derek, he is currently serving a 12-year federal sentence for egregious embezzlement and wire fraud at a medium-security facility in Terre Haute. The former chief operating officer now spends his days aggressively scrubbing industrial linens in the prison laundry room, earning 42 cents an hour. It is a staggering poetic contrast to the imported Italian suits and million-dollar offshore accounts he arrogantly flaunted. He attempted to send me a lengthy, handwritten apology letter last week through his public defender. I dropped the unopened envelope directly into my office paper shredder. Monica accepted a brutal plea deal for her role in the first-degree arson attack, trading her designer cashmere dresses for an oversized orange jumpsuit. She is serving 7 years in a state penitentiary without any possibility of early parole. Her wealthy family down in Atlanta completely and publicly disowned her the moment the scandal hit the national financial wires, desperate to salvage their own fragile country club reputations. She declared total personal bankruptcy last Tuesday, her mountain of unpaid luxury credit card debt permanently dissolving the lavish socialite identity she once prized above human decency. The violent shadow finance syndicate that relentlessly hunted us did not survive the transition of power. The actionable intelligence I surrendered to the federal task force triggered a massive coordinated raid across 3 different states simultaneously. The rival logistics executive, who secretly moonlighted as their primary enforcer, was indicted on 47 counts of federal racketeering. Apex Holdings immediately swooped in during the ensuing corporate chaos, aggressively acquiring their most lucrative maritime shipping routes for absolute pennies on the dollar. The enemies who sought to destroy my legacy ultimately financed its greatest modern expansion instead. I did not return to the woods after the ashes of my cabin finally cooled. I deliberately chose to occupy the luxurious downtown penthouse from which Derek was so violently evicted. I spent an entire week hiring private contractors to gut the interior to the concrete studs, completely erasing every physical trace of his arrogant existence. I redecorated the sprawling space with minimalist functional furniture, creating a quiet sanctuary high above the chaotic city streets. There is a profound, undeniable irony in sleeping peacefully inside the exact airspace my greatest adversary once claimed as his impenetrable fortress. My daily routine no longer involves chopping firewood to survive the brutal Midwestern blizzards. I spend my afternoons mentoring a highly talented, newly hired junior analyst who reminds me entirely of myself 30 years ago. He possesses the raw intelligence and the unbroken moral compass necessary to eventually govern the blind trust when I finally step down for good. I am rigorously testing his character through complex financial trials, ensuring he understands that true corporate leadership requires a foundation built on unshakable integrity rather than ruthless ambition. The future of Apex Holdings is finally secure. I do not visit the prison, and I do not accept collect calls from the state penitentiary. Some bridges, once they are intentionally soaked in gasoline and burned to the ground, should remain in ashes to brightly light your way forward through the darkness. I had sacrificed the best years of my entire life to build an indestructible kingdom for my direct bloodline, only to realize a devastating truth late in life. Blood means absolutely nothing when it becomes terminally infected by the rotting disease of entitlement and greed. Today, I am exactly 70 years of age, walking proudly through the halls of my company alone, but untethered from the anchors of my past. I survived the fire they set to consume me. I outsmarted the ruthless wolves disguised in suits. I shattered the syndicates, attempting to plunder my treasury. I reclaimed my rightful throne with uncompromising precision. The crumpled currency they threw at my feet bought them nothing but a miserable steel cage while my own quiet patience bought back the entire modern world. The greatest lesson a 70-year-old man can pass on is this: unconditional love is meant for children, but ironclad boundaries are meant for adults. We spend our lives sacrificing our blood, sweat, and youth to build a safety net for our family, hoping they will honor our legacy. But you must never hand over the keys to your kingdom to someone who has not earned the scars to defend it. Greed is a poison that can rot the deepest family ties. You can give your family the world, but always keep the absolute power to take it back. If this story proved that age is just a number and karma always collects its debts, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments exactly what you would have done with the $20 bill. I am Richard Caldwell. See you next time.